Good evening. I'd like to call to order the regular meeting of the Boulder Valley School District Board of Education for Tuesday, May 27th, 2014. Sandy, will you please call the roll?
Albright.
Here.
Belville. Here. Benford.
Here.
Fuqua.
Here.
Marquis. Here. Myers.
Here.
Reed.
Here.
Please stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Great. It's nice to be here this last meeting of May. And I don't have the vision in front of me, and I should know this by heart at this point, but I think we'll pass that and just go with our first item of business, which is the superintendent's report. So, Dr. Messenger.
Good evening, President Albright, members of the board, and those in attendance this evening for the board meeting. Welcome to all of you, and I have a few things I'd like to comment on this evening as a part of my report. First of all, a recognition that I was not able to attend, but members of our staff, I think Don Orr and others were in attendance, was a recognition by the City of Boulder's Landmarks Board, recognized our school district, BVSD, for exemplary work in the historic preservation and restoration of Mapleton School. So we have a nice framed certificate for this. Just a couple reasons why it was recognized. Just a reminder to all of us, Mapleton School was originally constructed in 1888. This school year, Mapleton began its newest chapter as BVSD's first early childhood education center, serving our youngest learners and preparing them for success in their educational careers. The award recognized the renovation work that was completed at Mapleton to make it suitable for preschool, which all of you have visited that site, you know. They've done a really nice job making it work like and feel like an early childhood center in a beautiful historic building. The challenge to design the space and to support a modern preschool program while being mindful of maintaining the character of the original building, and I think that's what's most impressive. And I'm going to list just a few of the things that they noted in this recognition around our restoration of Mapleton School. Restoration of existing windows, including reconstruction of the iconic quarter-round windows in the original entrance, installation of an elevator in the interior of the building in order to maintain the exterior historic portion of the building, and there were custom-made molding to replicate the original, installed panel doors in the historic building, and restored existing maple wood floors rather than using carpet or other modern finishings. Installed a tin ceiling reminiscent of those that were at the time of the original construction. The project is an example of a community partnership and was possible with the contribution of the City of Boulder's Economic Excise Tax Funds and also the BVSD 2010 mill levy override to expand early childhood programming within our district. RTA Architects and Allen Ford Architects partnered to complete the design work of the project. The general contractor was Adolph and Peterson. So nice to receive public recognition in our own community for the outstanding work on that Mapleton Early Childhood Center, and it's a point of pride for all of you, I know, and for our community. So nice recognition by that group for our district. So what else is going on? Saw most of you over the weekend attending graduation, so a lot of congratulations to our seniors who graduated in splendor, and so that was a fun few days of mini graduations, and we have a couple more coming up at the end of this week, and then we'll officially be through the graduation season for BVSD with well over 2,000 graduates from our system. And as you attended those ceremonies with me, you were, I'm sure, impressed with the student talent, the family celebrations, and the talent of our own staff as they were recognized or participated in the ceremonies. So again, thanks for all the board members and members of cabinet and others that joined us for those celebrations. I think the smallest graduation this year, Deirdre and I attended the Chinook West graduation with 5 graduating seniors, and then of course Fairview was, I think, our largest graduating class, and so that was quite the contrast, but both very memorable ceremonies and all those in between. So end of year activities. This is the week. Lots of things going on in our schools. Some of you are participating with your own children or neighbors or grandchildren in those, and so a lot of fun things going on. This is a culmination, not quite as formal as graduation, but having been a classroom teacher and a principal, there are a lot of really fun and recognitions and celebrations going on from pre-K all the way through high school. So it's a big week for students and staff as we finish up the year. So a nice week, and it's nice that we broke into a little early summer, so that spring fever will be on high, I'm sure, through the course of the week. One of the things I wanted to note is that we are well-positioned this year in the employment of new teaching staff in our district. We've worked really hard to move more quickly through the process of allocation of staff starting in March, identifying teachers that needed to be placed or transferred and get that taken care of so that we can get in the open market to employ new teachers. So it's a really busy time of the year for principals to be doing this, but they're very committed to doing it because we know that every week counts in the hiring season. So we've been working hard on that, and I'm getting very positive feedback from our principals about the quality of the candidates they're considering. And so I would just say, we're several weeks ahead of our normal hiring timeline, which feels very good to us. So thanks to all of our staff that have accelerated that timeline and working with the association to get transfer placements and keep moving through the hiring process. The last thing I would mention, and I'd be glad to comment on any of these topics or others if you're interested, is that next week, and the next 2 weeks actually, we'll have a couple of different trainings for our building administrators, principals, assistant principals, on the educator effectiveness supervision tools. You're familiar that we've put in new expectations for our teaching staff and new expectations for our principals around educator effectiveness. So we've been conducting training all of this year. There'll be training early summer for our administrative staff, and then, of course, continued training through the year next year. So we're feeling pretty good about where we are with the educator effectiveness standards, the professional standards, knowing they need to be refined. And so that's some of how our administrative staff will start the summer in their meetings, is some training around educator effectiveness. And I appreciate Shelley Landgraf and Lynn Jackson and their team working on that, and some of you serving on that committee to both design the expectations and also and provide training. So that's some work that's going on. So it's still a very busy time, but everybody's looking forward to a little summer break, I think, a little slowdown. Everyone except maybe the board will keep you busy through June. So anyway, thanks. That concludes my report. President Albright, I'd be glad to answer any questions anyone might have.
Great, thank you. Board members, any questions, comments? Jenny?
I have a question about the principals and educator effectiveness. I'm trying to think how to word it. So are we thinking at all about how to make it possible for principals to do that job and everything else they do? Or are we worried about that at all?
Yes, we're giving it a lot of thought. I don't know that we're worried or anxious. I think that we're working on strategies that will make it doable. I just know that our peer districts in the Denver metro area are hiring more administrators, and we're not. And we made that really clear from the beginning that we were going to figure this out. And we hope that there'll be in time some flexibility through the Colorado Department of Education, the State Board of Education, and the Colorado Legislature that sets more reasonable expectations on schools as opposed to the annual evaluation of every licensed staff member every year. So we're working on a strategy to manage what we are required to do without adding administrative staff. So we're certainly conscious of it, Jenny. We've just said we'll figure it out, and the good news is our teacher leaders, our staff are very supportive of it. I think we all know where we want to invest our resources, and that's probably not where we want to invest resources right now. So we're working on it. Some of what we'll do is provide an update to the board on educator effectiveness, and we'll have some conversation around that, so how we're going to manage it. So, we feel like we're still in transition with this implementation, but we will have a signed evaluation for every teacher next year, and so we just need to figure out how best to do that so that it doesn't create an undue burden on our building administrators. But I would say we're still in process about how to do that exactly.
Thank you.
Thanks.
And any other questions? I had a question. So on the training, would it be possible, is it appropriate for a board member to listen to any of that training?
I'd probably prefer that we might videotape some of it and share it with you. I would want to be sure that, there'll be some open conversations and dialogue, and I just think that probably that collegial relationship is pretty important.
Okay.
But we'd certainly be glad to
Yeah.
give you an overview of what it is or the materials. It's not, the content isn't, it's as much of this training is really the dialogue that goes on.
I see.
And I just would want to be sensitive that they could be as open and candid as they can be, like a staff meeting would be.
Right.
But I'd be glad to, we
Great.
certainly can give you information that might be helpful to you, just so you understand what's going on.
Well, I'd love to know a little bit more
Yeah,
about
all
it,
right, so I'll
is
work
what
with
I'd
Shelley
like to
on
know.
it.
I
Yeah,
don't
yeah.
necessarily need to be there
Yeah,
in
no, we
in
could certainly
person.
do that, and
Okay.
that'd be at least a next step. So,
Great.
okay?
Thanks. Anything else? Okay, the next item on our agenda is public participation. The board recognizes the value of public comment on issues related to the operation of the schools. To ensure that our meeting is conducted in an orderly manner, we ask the persons who address the board, 1, confine your comments to matters that are germane to the business of the school district. Speakers on agenda items will be heard first, followed by those speaking on non-agenda items. Please limit your presentation to 2 minutes. If we go over the first hour, public comment will continue at the end of the meeting. Recognize that students often attend or view our meetings. Speakers' remarks, therefore, should be suitable for an audience that includes kindergarten through 12th grade students. The board president may interrupt, warn, or terminate a participant's statement that is unrelated to the business of the district or inappropriate for K-12 students. There's a lighting system on the podium, starting at green when your 2 minutes starts, turning yellow when you have 30 seconds remaining, and it turns red at the end. When the light turns red, please wrap up your comments so that the board can hear from the maximum number of speakers and carry on with the rest of our business. So we have one person who has signed up today on an agenda item, and that is on the SIPSI update. And so I would like to invite Paul to come to the podium and address the board. Is it Paul Busquet? Thank you, sorry. I thought I might mangle it, but welcome. We're glad you're here this evening. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
I just want to introduce myself. I am a parent of a BVSD student, and I want to commend you on your mindfulness and the care that you've given this district. We've received an exceptional education here, both as my daughter and as parents. You guys do a terrific job, and that's probably the loudest message I'd like you to hear. I'm speaking very briefly on the SIPSI, which is, I love the questions you all asked last week at the May 20th special meeting. Very insightful and thoughtful to understand what's going to go into this final proposal. $500 million is a pretty substantial amount of money, and I am here to encourage you to invest as much as you can in the buildings and facilities, and obviously it's the teaching that makes the big difference, but having the facility is a huge part of the environment that our teachers and our students learn in. So I really do encourage you to seek the maximum. I love what Drake came back with, that this community has an appetite for investing in our schools. So I encourage you to take that to heart. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. The next list of people have signed up to speak on non-agenda items. And the first person to speak is Alex Bradley, who will have 4 minutes because Sherry Hewer has given 2 minutes to Alex. So welcome. You have 4 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to speak with you today. My name is Alex Bradley. I live in Louisville. I have a first grader attending Louisville Elementary School and a 2-year-old who will be there too soon. On Thursday last week, there was a community meeting between citizens of Louisville and Representatives Reed and Meyer. Also in attendance were Jennifer Rocky, principal of Louisville Elementary School, and Sandy Ripplinger, assistant superintendent of elementary education. The meeting was informal and allowed members of the community to voice their concerns regarding projected enrollment numbers at LES. My statement today was a result of this meeting and represents some of what concerned parents discussed at the meeting. Members of the Louisville community would like to request that the board direct staff to make a long-range, proactive plan to address the issues of enrollment at Louisville Elementary School. Enrollment issues for next school year have been addressed with the removal of the preschool program from LES and the conversion of our computer lab into classroom space. However, no plans are in place to address the increased enrollment growth after next school year. We feel that there are solutions that could be accomplished now to help alleviate some of the overcrowding. This includes reassigning developments currently being constructed and future developments to feed into other schools in Louisville that are well under capacity. This may not solve the entire problem, but would make a big difference without impacting currently enrolled families. BVSD Planning has already stated their desire to rezone the Blue Sage development. This development is in the city of Lafayette, but is currently zoned for Louisville schools. We would like to applaud BVSD Planning for this and suggest suggesting the boundary change, and would like to see this come to fruition. In your packet, which you just received, you will find a map of Louisville that shows the new developments that are currently being built or slated to be built within the LES boundaries. That's a nice colorful one in your packet. Of these, as many as 740 units are still due to be constructed. Alconis, which is just in initial design phases, could bring in as many as 225 additional units into the boundary area. In all, we're looking at over 1,050 new units within the LES attendance areas. In addition to the new developments, the older established neighborhoods around LES are turning over at an incredibly fast rate, bringing in new families to live in our community. This year, there have already been 9 homes scraped in Old Town, which has headed us well above the annual average of 15. These trends of growth are causing a steady increase in students at LES, not a bubble that will pop in a few years. Your packet also includes Chart B, which was prepared by Glenn Segree in planning, that shows the current 5-year projections for LES. As you can see, LES is expected to be of 100% student capacity by 2015-16, with each subsequent year projected to have higher enrollment than previous. I would like to point out that these projections do not include Alconis. One open enrollment LES is already closed. The graduation of current OE students will open spaces for new enrollment. However, these numbers of 65 to 70 open enrollment and administrative transfer students may be overestimated by as many as 24 students. Our current total number of open enrollment administrative transfer students slotted to begin next school year is only 41. With this in mind, the 105.1% capacity in 2017-18 could be much higher. We know that LES will be over capacity as soon as 2015-16, if not sooner. Installing costly portables to our already overcrowded school or drawing boundaries of established neighborhoods are both non-starters. We should instead look at the impact of developments currently on the drawing board. Members of the LES community would like BVSD to take a proactive approach with this issue to stop a political firestorm from rearing its head down the road. Because of a large number of new developments are in their final stages of approval with the LES current boundaries, this is a time-sensitive matter that we feel needs immediate attention. All of these developments may gain approval by the end of this summer. If you act now before people purchase their homes, you could avoid having 1,000 more invested stakeholders and residents involved in the process. I would like to close by thanking Glenn Segree for all of his hard work in trying to estimate future growth for LES. He has been extremely helpful and very patient when dealing with the community. I would also like to commend Jennifer Rocky, our LES principal, for her miraculous efforts at LES. She has made our school what it is despite the growth of over 200 students over the last 4 years. She has performed miracles, but even her magic won't be enough to handle such a crowded school. Thank you to the members of this board for your time and dedication to our children's education.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. The next person to speak, I'd like to invite Paige Rodriguez. Thank you for coming.
Hi, I'm Paige Rodriguez, and I'm the mother of 3 children in the BVSD. And I've come here this evening because I have grave concerns about the new Common Core mandate, which has been imposed on our school district. The BVSD's legislative platform is very clear in the importance of local control of our schools, and it states that, quote, local school boards are elected by their communities to ensure accountability in meeting student needs, provide effective educational programs, and determine the efficient use of resources. Now, this vision by the BVSD is a solid, common-sense approach to education, which I fear has been fatally undermined by Colorado's recent adoption of the Common Core mandate. As a result of the Common Core, schools are no longer actually accountable to the students. Instead, our schools are accountable to some vague testing standards which supposedly define success. Our children are being turned into test-taking monkeys, and our teachers and administrators have been reduced to the role of marionettes, subjected to the will of a faceless, bureaucratic puppet master. I also believe that the Common Core mandate will undermine effective educational programs. How can we expect to attract the most talented people to educate our children when these people will be subjected to a highly regulated and blindly bureaucratic system? At the heart of Common Core is the collection of data, which is part of an intrusive federal oversight plan called P through 20 Cradle to Career. Besides undermining our children's privacy, we will waste precious resources complying with all of Common Core's bureaucratic data requirements and regulations. Yet very few parents know what is happening. The silence has been deafening. If you value the local control of education, I ask you to stand up and defend it and fight this highly bureaucratic intrusion into the hearts and minds of our children.
Thank you, Ms. Rodriguez. Thank you for your comments. The next speaker is Brad Wright, speaking on Louisville enrollment. Thank you. Welcome.
Yes, hi. So
Hi.
I'm Brad Wright. I have a first grader at Louisville Elementary School and a 3-year-old that will soon be there. And again, I just wanted to back up what Alex just talked about. We're concerned about the rapidly expanding enrollment at Louisville Elementary School. Bruce was gracious enough to take some time to talk to me the other day and explain how the budgeting works. And so I get the fact that, there's only so much money to go around, but the way I see it is that there are other schools within our district that seem to have some available capacity. So it's not that Louisville as a town has a problem, it's that Louisville Elementary specifically has a problem. So, really we just want to focus on, if we can shift a couple of developments of these new developments and maybe move some out that really shouldn't be in the town of Louisville and focus on moving them to some schools that have capacity, I think that would be great. And we really just want to ask, for a plan or something to come forward that can help us solve this problem. And, again, we really want to emphasize the fact that we're not looking to change existing housing. Like people that have bought houses and bought those houses with the intention to go to a specific school should get to stay there. That's obviously, an investment that they made. But at the same time, if these people haven't made a commitment to a house yet, they haven't even made a commitment to this development yet, it should seem pretty easy to me at least. I don't know if it's as easy for you guys as it is for me to say it, but, to maybe shift some things around and, maybe alleviate some of the problems. And Jennifer specifically, or Jennifer Rocky, obviously principal of LES, had mentioned that, she knows that building and that it's really kind of maxed out. We really don't have a lot of rooms left. And what are we going to start putting kids in the cafeteria, things like that? And if other schools in that town maybe have some extra space, we should look at that. So thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Thank you for coming. Our next speaker is Kristen Martin. Kristen, welcome. Thank you for coming this evening. Thank you.
Thank you for having me. My name's Kristen Martin. I live at 1433 North Franklin Court in Louisville. I have a 4-year-old on track to attend LES in 2014-15, and I have a son who's a first grader at the school right now. We've been thrilled with the staff and the teachers at LES over our last 2 years there. The staff and teachers exemplify the passion and commitment to teaching and giving to the community that attracted us to move here 2 years ago. Having been a longtime resident of Boulder County, my husband and I chose Louisville specifically and our neighborhood specifically because of the reputation LES has for providing an outstanding environment for learning. The first grade class at LES this year is the largest they'd ever had, so they did accommodate that with adding a 5th class this year. Classroom size limit for 2nd grade is a little bit bigger, so we're faced with this class getting squished into 4 classes next year, which raises concerns for many parents in this grade. The main concern here is the quality of classroom time and when the classroom is exceedingly large. While I realize that this is just one grade level in a whole district, it brings to light the issue of enrollment at LES and our strong concerns that the increasing number of students will impact the school in a negative way. It is of great concern that we do not address, if we don't address the enrollment issues, as has already been stated, not only will this first grade class going into 2nd grade class suffer, but the whole school and all grade levels will suffer as hallways, cafeteria become unmanageable and school functions become limited due to the student size. We chose to live in this community because of the outstanding schools, and we specifically chose LES so that our children could benefit from this amazing experience. Part of that experience is classroom size. We value the quality of education, and it's important to us as parents. In closing, I would just ask that, and thank the board for your time and your commitment to our district. We would like to see the LES Standard of Excellence continue for years and generations to come. Please help us find alternatives to the enrollment explosion at our schools so that we can maintain the tremendous standard that we have for our children. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for coming this evening. Our next speaker is Jennifer, is it McLaughlin? McLaughlin, okay. Great, thank you, welcome.
Hi, I have a 1-year-old. His name's Dylan. And we moved here from Chicago, and then we did a bunch of research while living in Denver. And we chose to live in Louisville at our property at 452 West Griffith so that he could go to Louisville Elementary School. And now we are learning through our wonderful concerned neighbors that it's going to be overcrowded. And I just would ask that there's some sort of plan that we proactively come up with something so that the people who chose to live in this neighborhood for the purpose so that their children, future children, bought 3 years ago before we had a child, could go to a great school. So I just want to reiterate the concerns that the community has. That's
Great.
all. Thanks.
Thank you very much for coming and letting us know what you think. Thank you. Our next speaker is Danny Coleman. Danny, welcome. Thank you for coming this evening.
Thank you all for all your time that you put into this. I have 2 children already enrolled at LES, and we have been more than happy with everything. They love school, we love their teachers, and everything is positive. I just wanted to bring to the board's attention one small reason why this is more urgent than it may appear. One of the things is the developments, but also I have a 2-year-old at home, and although she won't be going to kindergarten until 2017, this is the time when we start looking around for possibilities of open enrollment. And as that's one of the options that's available to BVSD students, if they're not happy with the situation at their neighborhood school, I realize that the open enrollment, the easiest way to get into a competitive school is at the first year of preschool level. And so we're talking next fall for us if we are to choose to go somewhere other than LES for our 2-year-old. With that, I would like to encourage the board to just consider this sooner rather than later and give us some communication as to your direction.
Okay. Thank you for coming. Keith, is it Reese?
Rice.
Rice.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
So I'm the father of 2 small children. Like many of the others here, we moved to Louisville specifically for the education value. And wow, you guys got a big rock to push uphill on this one. This caught pretty much everybody off guard. The enrollment numbers coming into Louisville. We had a community meeting last week, and there were 40 people, 30 some odd people there. Most of that stuff is very lightly attended. And for me personally, I just want to share with you the things that came to my attention that caught me off guard. The comments weren't attributed to anyone specifically, but I did learn that the school district doesn't tend to act on overcrowding until school's at 130% capacity for several years. Could be a rumor, was bandied about. I found that personally kind of shocking. Another thing I learned getting involved in this when I first started heard that boundaries might be moved back in January was that the head of school, Ms. Rocky at Louisville, has been making this or trying to raise the awareness of this for several years now at the board level without gaining any traction. That was a cause for concern because she is such a highly accredited educator and has done such a tremendous job at that school specifically. I was surprised to learn that as a parent. The other comment right at the end that really got me was the perception and the comment that someone made at a BVSD function about 2 years ago. The gentleman said that the board tends to use the invisible hand of open enrollment to solve overcrowding at schools, meaning a school becomes overcrowded, becomes less desirable. Therefore, parents will open enroll elsewhere. Maybe a school, they didn't move into the homeschool area. It's not as crowded. And I would just really caution the board at using that theory as an enrollment policy, or maybe not a formal policy, but something that's kind of kicked about. And as a parent, if that is what's happening, I would really find that very disturbing. especially for the investment that I've made in move to Louisville, and many of these other people have too. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for coming. There's no one else signed up for public participation, is that right? Right, okay. So the next item of business is board communication. So are there any comments from board members? Jim, please.
Well, Tom and I were out visiting with many of these folks last week, and, you know, I had my best listening hat on and made some notes and tried to get ready to convey to you, my colleagues, what I heard. And, you know, I heard exactly what they just said in much better words than I wrote down. So, you know, I think I would just amplify on the biggest theme that I heard out of the conversation a week ago, which was, how do we get started on addressing this? And let's get going now. There's a bit of urgency. The projections for the school also show an enrollment of over 670 within 5 years. And that kind of caught my eye, having been at a school over 600. And so, you know, again, I think the community right now is in a spot where they would like to see action starting to happen and moving towards a final goal. But their patience isn't going to last forever. I believe we've had a very respectful conversation, and I'm hoping that my colleagues will want to explore this with me. I'm going to switch levels just real quick because the graduations are always such an awesome time of year for me. It really is a culminating thing in the district, and was happy to represent the board and the graduation. So anyway, thanks for that opportunity, and I'll turn it back to you, Lori.
Okay, thank you. Tina? Hi.
Yeah, I just want to thank the parents from Louisville for coming and sharing your thoughts and how much I appreciate hearing about the situation you're in. And Jim, thank you for your thoughts. And I really, really look forward to exploring this. I hate to think of not only being in an overcrowded school, but then having big class sizes to go along with that seems really tough. So I hope to discuss that further. So, and I have not been to a graduation yet, but I'm looking forward to going to New Vista this weekend.
Okay, Shelley? Go right around.
Well, I think by having gone to Fairview and Boulder High's graduation, I saw about half of our students graduate in the district. And it was indeed impressive. There's incredible students out there, and I know they're going to have a lot of success, and a lot of that's due to the district's efforts in making this a great school district. So that was fun this weekend. To the woman who was discussing the Common Core, this has come up before in front of the board, and I, for one, could not agree with you more. I think the Common Core is an incredible federal intrusion into local control in the school districts. I think it's the worst of corporate America influencing government in ways that do not help our children. And I urge you to go even beyond this board to the State Board of Education and to your legislators and discuss this, because I think it's a huge issue. And we're seeing in other states where boards of education are starting to turn on this issue a little bit and back away from it, and I certainly hope Colorado is one of those. I can't say I hold out that much hope, but my fingers are crossed that we'll take another look at that. As far as LES is concerned, there are several board members that are very concerned with class size, not just at LES, but at other schools as well. So I very much appreciate you highlighting this concern, because I think it's not just a concern at your school, but it certainly does cause us to focus on LES, which I appreciate. And I'm always happy when parents come forward and talk about their concerns. So thank you.
Okay. Anyone else? Tom? Sure. Yeah, okay. Tom.
So graduation is always a great time of the year, and I had the opportunity for attending both Fairview and Monarch for the 5th year in a row. And you know, people comment, you know, is my hand sore, or are my jaws tired of smiling? But it's always a pleasure, because you see the hopes and aspirations of our students that it's just rewarding from what we do up here to see this outcome at graduation time. And it's always a fun time. I mean, all the students are excited. They're glad to be moving on, and their parents are glad that they're moving on. And I got to witness a backflip in front of me at Monarch this year, he actually stuck it, which was good. One year there was one that did a backflip off the stage and didn't quite stick it, but anyway, so those are always great. And I also had the opportunity to attend peak-to-peak graduation, which was outside and the weather cooperated, and that was awesome, but a different flavor than our larger high school. So that was nice to see as well. Moving on to a comment about speakers. Thank you very much. I know I encouraged you all to come, and you did. So thank you for coming and talking to the entire board. It was last Thursday's meeting was very well organized. I credit you on that, and working hard to collect data and try to understand what the real numbers are and what the figures mean and how well we do projections. And what I heard was, we need a plan in place. And I told you at the time that I would advocate for that plan, and that's what I'm doing now. And maybe when we get to agenda setting, we can talk about how we do that, whether it should be an RFI or an item on the agenda for that plan. Because there are a number of different options, obviously. Redrawing boundaries has never been done while I've been on the board. And it looks like from some of the new developments that is just maybe only a Band-Aid. It would help for a year or so, but beyond that, maybe not. So I think we need to look at that very hard, because it's not only the maximum capacity of the schools, but the impact that it has, whether it's class sizes, on the quality of instruction, or on the ability of our teachers to actually focus and deal with that many students. It's the facilities. I mean, one of the study items tonight is on our proposed budget. And, I would like to see more money put into handling our growth. And that would be good to do, but if you don't have the facilities to do that, then it doesn't help. And if we're at max capacity on Louisville for facilities, then that should be something we're considering perhaps in our capital improvement process of adding classroom space. And it's not just classrooms, because then the common areas may not have the capacity, such as a cafeteria or auditoriums or gymnasiums or whatever it may be in any given school. So I want to make sure that we're looking at all of that in our capital improvement process. But whatever it is, we need a comprehensive plan as to how we deal with growth. It's a difficult problem because we don't want to spend a lot of money and build a lot of facilities that then in the future may not be utilized effectively. Glenn does a great job in projections, but we're still dealing with statistics, and we don't know what plans are out there for 5 years from now with new developments or what might influence any given school's projected enrollment. So I think that needs to be carefully considered. But I don't want to do it in a sense that that's going to take a year or two to figure it out, because from the great materials that you guys handed out at the meeting, it looks like the year after this next one, we will be in excess of capacity. So I think, maybe multiple fronts in the near term, and then some longer time commitments that would be needed in a longer term plan that be addressed to, are looked at to address this problem. So I'll leave it there, and we'll talk more about during our budget study item and our capital improvement study item about that, and whether we need to have an RFI or we can just get an agenda item on this, and it would need to be done relatively soon, I think. Thank you. Thank you for coming.
Great. Sam? Yeah? Please.
Well, I went to a small graduation. Briggs Gamblin and I represented the district at the Arapahoe Ridge graduation. The second time I've done that, and it's a wonderful family feeling to that. Some students who've overcome some special challenges, about 40 of them, and very strong feeling of community there. And I commend Principal Joan Bludorn and her staff for all their support of those students and congratulate them. That was wonderful. Also put in a plug for the Columbine 1 Mile Marathon that Lori and I were at, one of my favorite school events. Just such a cool thing coinciding with the Boulder Boulder. They block off streets in the neighborhood and the kids run around. A great active event for the Columbine students. And Dr. Messenger was there as well, although neither he nor I actually ran the mile. Yeah.
Too far for you.
Thank you, Ms. Rodriguez, for coming. I share your concerns with excessive assessment that has punitive consequences. And I really appreciate all you folks coming from Louisville Elementary to stick up for your neighborhood school. And I agree with the comments of my fellow board members that we have to come up with a plan and as soon as possible.
Thank you. Jenny?
So we all had to go to graduation, so I think I'll mention mine too. So I went to Broomfield High School graduation, which moved indoors 3 years ago. Thank you, Ginger Ramsey. And it makes it a much more pleasant environment than worrying about whether it's going to rain or not. And I have to tell you, somebody asked me later on, well, who was the commencement speaker? And I said, well, the students talked. And he goes, no, who was the commencement speaker really? And I said, no, students talked. And we got in this kind of loop. But I have to say that students we had, and I'm sure you all had the same experience, our student talks were some of the best ever. We had 2 students who wrote a song together and 2 students who did a little riff on, things, on their time at Broomfield High School, and it was great. So I really, we could have had somebody famous, I suppose, but I really loved having the students speak. They did a great job. And then I went to Boulder Prep graduation, which always makes me cry at least once, and because I think that probably like the kids, some of the kids you saw, those kids that are graduating, actually managed to graduate from Boulder Prep, are kind of heroes. I mean, the staff and faculty are wonderful and do their best to work with these kids, and that makes a difference, I know, but I'm always impressed at the way the kids are sort of heroes of their own lives and have really, and the accomplishments that they've managed to make. So anyway, that was a lot of fun, and was it last week or the week before? Since our last board meeting, Sandy Ripplinger and I visited BCSIS and High Peaks Elementaries, which are 2 of our choice programs housed in the same building. And I had a really good time. I really enjoyed, they're just really different kinds of programs. And it occurred to me that and I'm sure that we do this, but there's some lessons to be learned from those programs and some concerns. And I mean, that I thought were really kind of helpful. There was just different kinds of learning going on, and I really loved, especially at BCSIS, the joy, the laughter in the classrooms and the joy in learning that I hope that we don't sacrifice in our quest for academic rigor, because I think that's something that stays with you for a lifetime. And then the other thing that it occurred to me is we've talked a little bit about excessive testing and the ill effects of testing on our schools, and I think especially for both of these alternative programs, the state testing has some adverse effects because it's testing things out of the order that these programs present their curriculum. It's not that these programs don't have rigorous curriculum already, or that the kids don't learn the things that the state would like them to learn, but that they may learn them in a different order. And I think especially in light of the love that many people in Colorado have for school choice and charters, it's ironic that we have a testing program in place that may limit the school's ability to provide that kind of choice by testing everything in a certain order. So just a couple of lessons learned. I'd like to comment that, and this may be an RFI, that CDE did a follow-up audit of our TAG program, which I've been hearing about, and people asking me, what is it exactly we're planning to do with the results of that CDE audit of our TAG program and their more in-depth findings? I know they'd done one about a year ago, but they came back and did one this year. And so that's just sort of a question, I guess, for you, Bruce, is what are we going to do with that information now that we have it? Oh, good, okay, great. And then, I think I'd like to, I'm going to give a shout out to 3 classrooms that have allowed me to visit on a fairly regular basis. Amy Ambacker's third graders at El Dorado K through 8 let me come and read fairly often, and I always have a great time, so shout out to them. And Bev Sanders' second grade class at Sanchez Elementary, she lets me come in and have kids read to me, which is always a total blast. And it reminds me, and I think it's important because it reminds me that we talk a lot about the work we as adults do with kids, but I think we should always remember the work that kids do to learn, because you think, you forget. I forget. I feel like I've always known how to read, but I forget what hard work it is for a lot of kids and how they have to really be committed to their own learning, and they're only like 7 and 8. So I really appreciate that and think that we should all keep that in mind about our students as well. They're just great. And then I got to go to the catering final again at Broomfield High School. Donna Earlywine's class, great class, and way too much food, but it was really good. It was really good. And then finally, I would like to thank the Louisville people for, clearly this is going to be something we'll be talking about. I would like to comment, however, that it's never an open enrollment tool of ours to make schools less attractive. I don't know who said that, but it's actually, nothing could be further from the truth. I would never, as a board member and a former parent at a very crowded school myself, make that kind of choice or decision. And I actually think it's really great that Louisville Elementary is so popular, that so many of you love your school so well, and that'll certainly help as we move forward trying to figure out how to deal with the enrollment issues in Louisville. So, and I'd also like to thank Jim and Tom for attending the meeting and being able to help us with our discussion as we go forward. So that's all I have.
Thank you. I also would like to thank the parents who came today to talk about the Louisville Elementary School enrollment situation. There was something that was said by one of the speakers that I just would like a little clarification on. I think, and I'm not sure I've got this 100% correct of what I heard, but I think I heard that a school has to be at 130% of capacity for several years before we address these issues. I just wonder if you could talk to what
I think
we
the speaker
really do.
said that was a rumor he had heard, and it
A
is
rumor, that's right.
So I just like to affirm it's a rumor. So that'll help clarify that. So all those in the audience and those listening, they'll know that's a rumor.
Great.
Not accurate. I think that'd be appropriate.
Not generally, thank you. But I would like to say thank you to the parents for coming and for letting us know what you've heard and what the concerns are. And I think it would be appropriate to get some feedback, to have you explain what is going on and what the plans are. It sounds like it's a more complicated issue here with the growth. What would be better? Sure, please comment. That'd be great, thanks. And if we need any other information, we could do that later too, but thank you.
So our planning team, under the direction of Don Orr and Glenn Segru, have been in active conversation with the city planning staff. I personally have attended a meeting with them, so there's ongoing conversation around all these topics. We've been working closely with Jennifer Rocky. We've been communicating with a number of the folks in the audience this evening. So I think we're all working together, and we are in communication with developers on the subdivisions that they referenced tonight. And so we're working on it. And you have a policy that guides you towards redistricting if you choose to do that. There's a public review and hearing process, which we've communicated pretty clearly to the community, that it'll be an open public process. And so there are, as Tom mentioned, there are other ways to manage enrollment also. That is a way. It's not a way this district has tended to use, but it doesn't mean that we couldn't consider that. So we're very much in the middle of this and working on it. I think there's a sense of urgency conveyed tonight that we share to some degree. But there's also probably a reason to go in a thoughtful, balanced, thorough approach on this, because usually every action has a reaction. And so we just need to be sure that we think about the impact it could have on other schools or other school communities. So, but that'll be a part of the review process. So we're very much working on it, and I'd be glad to provide an update on the timeline to the board in a written document in the next week or so. I mean, we've communicated all this to the City Council of Louisville. I've copied you on that communication. You've received it. So, so there's a little difference in the room around projections, and that's okay, because they're projections. So people use different data sources, and that's to be expected. So, but we're very much working on this, and our staff's it's got the full attention of our staff, and we're working closely with them. So that's a quick update, Lori, but we'd be glad to put it on a timeline and at least lay out some options. As you know, you've got some big things in front of you in the next few months that are going to require some time and attention, and probably our recommendation will be to give priority to SIPSI right now because of the timing of issues and decisions you need to make this summer. And plus, summertime is a really difficult time to conduct public hearings and process because folks are scattered about. So, but we'll give you an update.
Okay.
Okay.
Great. Sounds good. Thanks. Well, we're talking about graduation, and I attended 3. I attended Fairview's graduation and Netherlands graduation this weekend, and last week, Justice High, and it was just, I was starstruck because the 2 speakers were Bill Withers of Lean On Me, was one of the speakers who was there, and the other was a woman named Carlotta Walls-Lanier, who was one of the Little Rock Nine, who integrated schools in the 60s, I think. I'm not great on history. But it was very inspiring, and it was just terrific to listen to 2 people who were just great, who had just a ton of enthusiasm and positive messages for our students, particularly students who really struggled with school. But it was a very uplifting graduation, and I was just glad to be there, and I would like to go again. It was emotional and very special. So I think that's it for board comments, unless somebody has another comment. Okay, the next item on our agenda are action items with consent grouping, and I will read them. They are personnel items, approval of minutes, May 13th, regular meeting, approval of minutes, May 20th, 2014, special meeting, acceptance of donation from Mesa Elementary School, 2014-2015 proposed fees, permission for an employee to sell products to the district. Do I have a motion to approve? Jenny? Is there a second? Sam? Are there any items that anyone would like to pull? Are there any items that anyone would like to comment on or have questions? Sam?
On the fees, there are a lot of them, and we're adding more. Is there any consideration to potentially having an overall cap on fees like we do with Families for Athletics? At a certain point, you have a number of your kids in athletics, there's a cap on the total amount the family pays. I just wonder if I know we give a break to students on free and reduced lunch, but I think for families just over that cutoff for FRL, with multiple kids in the district, it could become an issue. So just a comment.
I don't believe it's a practice that we have talked about, but it's certainly something we could explore. I mean, as you can imagine, depending on the courses or opportunities students are accessing, the configuration of those fees could look very different from elementary school through high school. But, maybe one of the things we could query is just if we have a sense of how burdensome any combination of those might be. I mean, it's a little easier to eyeball it with an activities because you can only be doing one activity probably at one time, but it's a little harder with not. So we could take a look at that, Sam, and just see just what the general level of burden is, and maybe then compare that to activities. So let us follow up with that. Okay.
Okay. Shelley?
I had a question about fees too, and I would certainly support that request, that we look at a cap on that. Can you say something about the learning management system and what that fee involves?
Yeah, I'm going to actually ask Deputy Superintendent Pilch to comment on that. She's worked the closest with that.
Thank you, Dr. Messenger. Yes, as the evening goes on, I seem to be losing my voice. Excuse me. So, the learning management system fee is an individual student fee to allow the student to access and have a learning management system account for online learning. And so, and it expires each year. So it will be used in our schools where a lot of blended learning and online coursework is occurring.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And then just a comment about headphones for assessment.
Yes.
mean, so many people in this district, including board members, are so opposed to the amount of assessment our kids and amount of testing our kids go through that to ask them to pay $5 for headsets seems adding insult to injury. So I just want to put that out there as just a philosophical, comment about that. But the real question I have about fees has to do with the IB and AP fees. I mean, parents are already paying, at least for AP, $85 to $90 per test. And I assume IB fees are similar, if not more. And so are these new fees, $120 to be even a part of if the IB diploma program, the $120 is a new fee for that? And then in addition to that, there's $157 program registration fee, so that's $277 additional IB fees in addition to the fee per class, is that correct?
So these are not new costs to the family. The IB diploma candidates have been experiencing these costs in the past. We were passing the $157 fee through the testing fee in the past, where you see that we had a testing fee that was to be determined. We were passing it through on that. On the $120 fee, this is really in an effort to do what Sam is asking, which is cap the amount that a family can be asked to give at least one of our high schools that offers International Baccalaureate. Each student who participates in a pre-IB or IB course, their family is asked to give a donation per course. So this would eliminate those open-ended donations. If they choose to charge a fee, then it's capped at $120 at the fee, and then they wouldn't also be asking for an additional donation.
So that's in addition to the cost of the test, though?
It is in addition, yes. And it's real costs for materials for the Community Action and Service Project, as well as preparation for the exams.
Well, I'm certain the district thought this through, and I hope we got input from teachers and parents about this, because, it does seem like every year we approve fees, the fees are always going up. They're never going down, and this is just another case of that. So,
Shelley, if I may, at one of our high schools that typically asks a minimum of $30 per course for participation in an IB course, if that student was taking 6 IB courses, that would be $180 that they would be asking that family to give. If they choose to do the fee instead, the most they could ask would be $120. So we're hoping to actually limit some of that, cap some of that.
so if you have to pay this $157 IB registration fee, so even if you're only taking one course, you have to pay that fee?
No, this is actually for International Baccalaureate diploma candidates.
Okay, so it's for diploma.
Yes.
Both those fees are, right? The $120 and the $157?
Well, yes, and if the school chooses to do, you could, at Fairview, for example, you could be a student who is taking 6 IB courses, or 5 or 4, and not be a diploma candidate.
Right.
And being asked to give a donation for each of those courses, that school could choose to do the $120 fee instead for those courses.
Okay, so you could only be taking 3 classes and get hit with a $120 fee?
Well, you'd have to be committed to the Community Action and Service Project. So you're in pretty deep at that point with IB courses. But because the programs are different at the 2 high schools, at Centaurus, every student in IB is an International Baccalaureate diploma candidate. And at Fairview, you do not have to be a diploma candidate to be in the International Baccalaureate courses.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Any other comments or questions? Okay, Sandy, will you please call the vote?
Albright.
Yes?
Balefell.
Yes.
Benford. Fuqua.
Yes.
Marquis.
Yes.
Myers.
Yes.
Reed.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you. The next item on our agenda is the SIPSI update. And Bruce, Would you
Good evening.
bring us up to date on
I'm
where
back.
we are now with SIPSI?
Great. So we have two big items on the agenda this evening that are really important to the future of the district. The budget, which is the next item, and the SIPSI, which they are both listed as study items. To refresh your memory and those in the audience or those viewing, a week ago tonight we had a 3-hour work session where you were presented the Capital Improvement Planning Committee's recommendations for 3 priority sets of needs. And so we had good discussion around that. Subsequently, as a part of that, you had questions of which information was provided to you this weekend that answered all the questions that were generated through the meeting. I want to express my appreciation to our staff and cabinet who worked through the weekend to finalize that. And also, so those were provided to you via email, and those are now posted on the Boulder Valley School District board site in the library section of board docs. So if you can find them there if you've lost your email, and any member of the public. So those are all public domain. And also we shared with you the results of the Drake polling, which you received a cover memo from Bob Drake, and also the polling results in kind of a PowerPoint presentation. Those documents are also available in the library section of the board docs website. So I just wanted to make sure that we all have that same information. So based on the polling data that we received, and as you know, that's an important part of our planning process, and you anticipated it coming, and so we were pleased with the timing of that. So what we found in that polling data is favorable ratings of our school district and trending positive, which is very encouraging and a tribute to your governance and leadership and our commitment of our parents, employees, and students. And the graduation ceremonies this weekend, I guess, were just a nice affirmation for really positive polling results. So one of the things, so we ask a lot of questions, and a lot of data is there, and we aren't doing a presentation on that tonight, as I shared with you. We'd be glad to answer questions about it. As you know, one of the things, and I mentioned this last week, is in this polling data, is that we sample to see what the interest support is around the nature of the work we would do with the bond if you chose to have one, and what level, what threshold would be okay with our public. And so we took it down 3 different paths, a low, medium, and high, not exactly reflecting our priorities, but in the ballpark of those areas, just because we generally knew when we set this up, this is where we might be by this evening. So if you had a chance to look at that data, what Bob Drake indicated in his cover memorandum was that anything that polls higher than 60% in this level of polling is encouraging. And so what you found was that all 3 packages polled higher than 60% and some as high as 63%, and the largest package being as strong as the other 2. And that was, I believe, at 570 million. So I know that polling data influenced the board in 2006 when they ultimately made a decision to go forward with a bond campaign. So what I'd like to do to start the evening is deliver to you my recommendation. I said I would do that in my emails to you this weekend, and last week I mentioned that as well. So I mentioned earlier in my comments to you that I didn't directly participate in the SIPSI process, but I monitored it really closely, and I did participate in the executive committee work with SIPSI. So I have a real good sense of what's in those packages. Probably a pretty deep understanding, and as does our staff. So I actually took time today with leadership, and we sat down and said, so, all right, Superintendent, this is your opportunity. If there's anything in the first 3 priority packages that you looked at, 1, 2, and 3 last week, that as a superintendent I would recommend that you don't place as the highest priority, that you move it out of the package. And then I went through and looked at those that weren't included in the 3 packages and said, is there something there that's compelling to me that I'm going to recommend that you move it in? The result of that is, my recommendation to you is to seriously consider a bond package that would be at the maximum level of priorities 1, 2, and 3, and honor, as best you can, the recommendations coming from SIPSI. I know we all have our own personal insights, and if I were to build my own perfect $570 million package, it might have a few different things in it. But honestly, knowing the amount of time this group invested and the amount of research they did and the hours of dialogue, and these are folks who I think truly do represent our community like you do. We had parents and non-parents. We had all of them taxpayers. We had professionals that work in this industry and those who don't, and folks who were in the last bond and those who are new to this process, parents of all age of children from all areas of our school district. So I really believe not only a very dedicated, thoughtful group, but a really disciplined group that worked through this. So I'm really confident in the set of recommendations they delivered to you. So I'd like to encourage the board to have that as at least a starting point, that you want two things I guess I'm recommending. Consider that maximum value that polled positively in the Drake survey, and because there's no question we have need that probably exceed that level, but we didn't test higher than that level. We think this is ambitious in itself. It's not to our legal limit. It's below our legal limit of bonding capacity, but not a lot lower, within 100 million of that. And so, but we know these needs have compounded over time. So we're playing catch up. As they were in 2006, we're playing catch up again. So anyway, that's my recommendation, that you consider the SIPSI recommendations, priorities 1, 2, and 3 in a package of around $570 million as we go forward. So that's my recommendation. It was SIPSI's recommendation, and I know I'd be glad to answer questions about that. As I indicated, we don't have presentations on any of the topics that the questions were provided. We sent those to you in advance, so you'd have a chance to read through them. We have staff here that we'd be glad to further elaborate on any of those points. A couple folks asked for some additional information, and I was able to provide that prior to the meeting. And if there are new questions or issues, I mean, we'll be glad to do another week's worth of, we actually have 2 weeks before the next board meeting, but we'd be glad to continue to gather some information if that'd be helpful to you, to help you make a decision. But with that, Lori, I think I'll stop and see what questions the board might have. But again, that's my recommendation. And again, I suggest we look at doing the full package of priorities 1, 2, and 3 at a level around $570 million. I just want to remind you a little bit on process. That it isn't anything you have to take action on now or next week. Really what we need into the month of June as administrative staff is that we need general guidance of what the size of the package, so we can draft bond language, election language, and bring it back to you in August. You won't act on that until August is our timeline. And you don't have to decide on every detail of what's in the facility master plan. You give us enough direction in these general categories, then we'll go to work in the month of July and create, as I mentioned last week, a facility master plan that will have a school by school, program by program, because we have some of the projects aren't schools, that would describe in more detail what the implications are of this potential level of investment, and you would have that in hand when you return in August. Then eventually in August, the action would be to embrace a facility master's plan, at least for now, and probably ask you to consider at least taking action on bond language that would in the election in November 2014. So, but really, we just want to, when we part company in June and have the July recess, have enough direction that we can do those latter two things in August. So with that, Lori, we'd be glad to answer questions. What I would ask, if board members have questions of which there needs to be a response, that those be directed to me, and then if I can answer them, I'll just answer them. If I can't, I'll ask the appropriate staff member to come to the podium and do that, and if we aren't able to answer it tonight, we're certainly going to make note of that, and we'll get it back to you as soon as we can. Okay? Thank you.
It's pretty exciting news.
It is exciting.
Yeah.
We're very pleased with the polling
Thank you
results.
for the report and the update and your recommendation. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
All right, well, board members. It's one of the biggest things we're doing this year is this bond. Are there comments or questions? Jim?
Yeah, I read those polling numbers and I immediately just thought, wow, been doing this a while, and that's a sign that the community really has a lot of trust in the district, a lot of shared respect for the district, a lot of understanding of what the needs are in the district. I was particularly confused by the majority support being for the fuller package versus the minimum. And so I kind of tested that with a couple of my taxpayer friends over the weekend. And they were like, you know what? We've got a lot of needs here. Go fix them all. If you're not going to, go fix the ones you need for 4 years. Give me a new list. It was pretty specific, and the feedback was kind of interesting to me. After last week's beating up and thinking of, you know, I think basically I looked at the priority 3 knowing how much we needed it and feeling, oh gosh, I'll be happy if we can get priority 1 even onto the ballot. Seeing that there's support for all of the priority 3 packages and that's the package, in fact, the community wants to be asked about. I am going to go with the CPSI's recommendation. I'm going to thank them again for their time and, you know, thank Paul Bousquet for his comments from the community saying, hey, you guys have opportunity here. Take advantage of it, and it's the kids who are going to benefit. So for me, my questions now switched over the last week into, all right, almost to campaign mode. So I'll turn it over to some of the other colleagues who may have other questions or want to get deeper into something. But again, I'm fully supportive of the priority 3 ask. Thanks.
Thanks, Jim.
Thank you. And Shelley?
I'm looking at the Drake polling report, and when you get down to the bottom, it talks about conclusions and recommendations. The chart just before the conclusion section shows how the polling results changed after the poll and dropped. I would say, you know, I don't know if it's significant or not, but it noticeably dropped after taking a follow-up vote. And like from 62 to 56%, for example. And they state in here that you need a minimum of 60% in a pre-election poll to hope that this will pass. And so these after votes they all fall below that. So I'm wondering what that means, or what you think that means in terms of the likelihood of this passing.
So we, cabinet members some members of cabinet met with Bob Drake, and we had this discussion, Shelley, last week. So in Bob's reference, 60% plus is in the initial polling. It's not unusual that you do the follow-up question, and it isn't unusual that it would drop. So when in our conversation, so I don't think anything about this is overly concerning. It would be a pattern that Bob Drake would expect to occur, because the second question, I think what he reinforced to us is that you got really clear support, really strong support on some of the topics. When they did the rating of those things folks valued the most, that were upwards of 80% of those items within a bond that they most valued. And his point is you just have to build on that strength, that there's enough there. You just have to build on it. So, I mean, it's something we need to pay attention to, but it's an education issue. And I think to Jim's point, I mean, I think that's, there'll be a campaign committee independent of the school district. And so that would be work we need to do, is to maintain the strength of the initial reaction of the poll. So I don't think there's a pattern here that's concerning. I think it's not unusual, but it's one that we need to pay attention to. That's the strength of a campaign in education.
Mm-hmm.
So I think, obviously, Bob knew that when he wrote the recommendation, or the cover memo that he sent to you.
Right. Well, obviously, if the voters support this, then I'm in support of it, because I support what the voters want. The only concern I would have at this point is what we've been discussing here around class size, that there's nothing in the CPSI recommendation that would recommend expanding schools to accommodate smaller class size. And so I'm not sure how we will introduce that, if we decide as a board that that's something that we need to consider, or how we would know what that would cost at this point. But that's something that I would like to see, like where the spots are in the district where we're likely to see enrollment grow at such a rate that, you know, if we want to reduce class size and have to build additional classrooms, what will that cost? And what might that replace in the CPSI recommendation, or would that be additive? I don't know, but some sort of discussion around that issue before I would be willing to proceed.
So if I could comment on that, Lori. So in the report, I know I sent you a lot of information, a lot of homework this weekend, but Lynn Segru pulled item 7 together in the memo to you that was around staffing ratios and school capacity. I'm sure you read that. So our elementary schools presently are at 82% capacity. So we have 18% capacity to grow into. Now, that isn't any one school. That's an average, and that's looking at all instructional spaces that can be used as classroom according to education specifications and taking the enrollment and using, I mean, it's just math. So depending on identifying the spaces is work, but then what affects capacity is what you use as staffing ratios. So what he noted in there is that if we were to alter, so you read this, but if we were to lower the ratio by 1, then district-wide, out of 1,300 classrooms, we'd need 7 additional classrooms. And then he goes on to talk about a number upwards of the ratio adjusting to 21 to 1, so a drop of 3 on the average students per classroom is 23 classrooms are needed. None of that is a very big percentage of the whole. So I think that now whether you want to consider that in this bond or not, obviously, is your decision. Our projection on a per classroom cost depends on the building, depends, some buildings we wouldn't add classrooms to some buildings. Whittier, pretty small campus, we wouldn't add classrooms there. The only way we're going to manage enrollment at Whittier is to limit the number of students, and we had that conversation 2 years ago. LES, I wouldn't plan on adding classrooms to that building. We've got capacity in Louisville. We have capacity in Lafayette. So, we've got areas where we have classrooms. So we just have to be careful that we don't overreact to the hot spots, because our overall capacity, as is noted here, is well below 90%. And so now we don't wait to 130% to make decisions, as was noted earlier. But what we do is that if a school has capacity for their neighborhood and the reason they're full is because of open enrollment, we turn that off. And we successfully did that at Whittier. We now have initiated that at LES. So with 40% plus of our students not in their home school, we can do all we want with boundaries, but as long as we have open enrollment, they're going to go where they want to go, as they should, the parents with their children. And then at some point, if a building's full, we just have to say we can't. So, the only area we think we have a hot spot that really can't be managed through our traditional enrollment management strategies is Erie. And that's why we're proposing a new school. Erie, we don't have the capacity because we don't have a school there. We don't have the capacity to house those new housing starts. But if you just took, for example, the city of Louisville, there's not any data we have that we can create in the most aggressive scenario that we can't accommodate all the elementary children in the 3 elementary schools in Louisville. Now, that's not where the attendance boundaries are for those 3 schools now, so that's work we have ahead of us. But so I just want to give that context. Our Lafayette schools, none of them are near capacity. We have Whittier and Boulder. Crestview is a big school. They have well over 100 students that are open enrolled there. If ever they thought they were too big, they just need to reduce that down. So the other thing, keep in mind, is every student we enroll is how we fund our schools. And we take, you saw the data from Glenn, we take a number of students in from out of district. So if we want to limit the number of children in our school district, we could add bigger buildings, or we could simply reduce the number of open enrollment students who come in out of district. Now, just keep in mind, there's a cost associated with that, so it reduces our overall budget. So those are really important conversations to have, and I've urged you in a couple communications that we actually have a work session in the early fall on this issue, because if we have the resources to reduce class size, and I've run those numbers, it's over $4 million for each student per classroom on the average ratio is over $4 million. So I think a conversation the board needs to have and the community needs to have with you is whether that's where you'd spend your first $4 million. I know some probably feel that's exactly where we'd spend the first $4 million. Some of the rest of you have ideas of other ways you'd spend the first $4 million because you've communicated that to me. And some of those don't require a classroom. Some of those require interventionists or licensed professionals to work in areas that might have a bigger impact on student success than reducing the average class size by 1. But those are really philosophical, thoughtful conversations that need more input than we're going to do in 2 weeks, is my recommendation, that we have those conversations. I think we have capacity in this bond to manage the enrollment needs that we have if we build the school in Erie. I do recommend, because it's in that package, to build the school in Erie. The recommendations include full day K, and also include the preschool. So that I sent you a note on that this weekend that shows how that creates capacity within those buildings. Doesn't address the class ratio capacity, but truly, if we went back to where we were in 2011, $5.5 million, those students would all fit fine in our present schools without adding any more space. Because at 82%, 81%, 82% capacity, we have space to do that. Our reality is in our schools right now, if they received additional resources for staffing, many of them would not put them in classroom teachers. If we gave principals that discretion, that's not where they would put it. They would put it in supports for students within their buildings. Could be interventionists, could be paraeducators in the health room, could be supervision in the lunchroom and classroom. When we talk to principals, that's what we hear the most. That's the pinch they're feeling. And as we make our way through summer and early fall with the staffing reserve, which is in the next topic on the budget, we'll need to visit about how much discretion we want to give principals for that, because it may not reduce class size. I shared one elementary school with you today where they fit fine in their building, and the reality is we wouldn't, even if we had a full FTE, probably break that section down. So anyway, I guess you're right. We don't have planning 10% more classrooms where we have hotspots, because honestly, we think the only hotspot we have is in Erie. And right now, in example, Broomfield High School, we have over 400 students, I believe, who are open enrolled into that building from out of district. And truly, if we didn't have those students in that building, the nature of that comprehensive high school would look very different. And so we are actually benefiting in some of our less than hot spots to keep schools robust. Pardon, 600 students out of 1,300? 1,400. So we've used open enrollment to our advantage to maintain high-quality, robust programs in our school. So I just think there's different ways to look at this, but I think our hotspot is Erie. And that's really what SIPSE believes is too. So you might remember one of the subcommittees was enrollment. So SIPSE did actually look at this. They looked at it in depth. Glenn spent some time with them. And so we looked at a lot of data with them. Some of that very data you've looked at in the presentations you've seen Glenn make. So that's work that they did, and that's why Erie is recommended in here, is one of the areas we deal with enrollment. That was one of the subcommittees. So I don't know if that helps.
Well, help me out. I'm just looking at Chart B that just got handed out in this package. And I'm not looking at capacity, I'm just looking at the growth from 2014 to 2019. And it looks like between LES, Louisville Middle School, and Monarch, that we're looking at 300 additional kids over the next 4 or 5 years. So
I don't know that this has even been reviewed by our staff. So
well, it looks like it says Glenn's name at the top. So on
which chart are you looking at?
Chart B. Doesn't have a page number, sorry. It's toward the end. But I don't know if the numbers are right or if they're Glenn's. But the question is, if indeed, an area is going to grow by 300 students over the next 4 or 5 years, I mean, that implies 10 additional classrooms, right? I mean, there's 300 students. So how do you calculate how many classrooms that's going to take? And if this is true, then why wouldn't it have come out in the SIPSE recommendation if Glenn was working with them? I just don't understand if we're really looking at growth, and we've been looking at growth over the last 5 years in Boulder Valley School District, at some point you have to build more classrooms.
So, Shelley, I'm going to ask you to take a bigger view of this.
Okay.
Because people are working out of their worst fears. They're making some assumptions that nothing will change. The reality is that one of the subdivisions you've received communication on, it's been talked about. We've already talked to developers that's likely not to stay in Louisville. It's in the city of Lafayette. And so we've already had those conversations. That will require a boundary change. So just let us work through that. We have under-enrollment in every one of our Lafayette schools. Every one of them are under-enrolled. And so if we move that subdivision, which will require an action of the board, into the Lafayette attendance area, that's a portion of that, whatever number they're projecting would be there. So I would just actually recommend that if this is an interest of discussion for the full board, that we actually study a work session on enrollment trends. We've done that before. We are not anxious. We are not worried about taking care of the students that reside in our school district. We open enroll over 2,000 students in our school district. So if at any point we felt we needed to manage that, that's an easy way for us to do that. And if we have an abundance of students in a particular area, I mentioned before, there aren't enough children, even if we don't change boundaries and move that subdivision back into Lafayette, all of the children that are presently in the attendance areas within Louisville will fit into those 3 elementary schools, LMS and Monarch High. All of those schools, the 3 that are the fullest, all have open enrollment students, all of them. Mm-hmm. Louisville Elementary, Louisville Middle School, and Monarch High School. All of them have open enrollment. And they aggressively go after open enrollment. All of those schools, with the exception of LES where we've closed it. There's a reason they went from 400 to 600. They aggressively went after open enrollment. And now we're managing that just like Whittier did before. So that, I just caution, we have 55 school sites, that we don't overreact to any one of them.
No, I'm
because
not.
we-
I'm actually
just-
trying to think about the entire district,
Right.
and if it continues to grow,
There's no.
and if we ever did want to try and lower class size, are we thinking about facilities in that way? That's my only
So
question.
the work that Glenn has provided to you is almost all of the open space, with the exception of Erie, is built out in the Boulder Valley School District. If we can maintain 1 to 2% growth a year, that will be good for us. We're not sure we can do that, because at some point when it goes flat or starts to go down with an aging population, this school district has closed elementary schools in the past. And the reality is, if we get in a decline mode, that might be our reality again. Then it'll be just a matter of where they live. So this is a much deeper conversation that really we have to look out well over a decade, because Boulder County has so much open space dedicated. I mean, we're talking about some subdivisions here. As a part of the whole, they're really small pieces of the big picture of 30,000 students. The reality is we would likely be in a decline right now if we weren't an attractive school district through open enrollment. We'd already be in a decline mode, with the exception of, Erie would offset some of that. I mean, Boulder went through that, where we went through a decline mode. Your predecessors closed 2 schools as a result of that. That's not impossible to think that won't happen in the next 10 to 15 years again, given that we are landlocked and we have open space dedicated, and that's not likely to change. And so our biggest challenge, this is not my worry. Building for enrollment growth is not my worry. My worry, if I'm with you for a decade, is really how we'll manage our enrollment so we can have a strong budget and we don't have to close neighborhood schools. That's a bigger concern to me. So I would just caution about adding classrooms because of some short-term impacts in some neighborhoods. When we have an 82% capacity, I would worry that we'd build space that would sit empty. And I worry that it would contribute to the need to close schools at some point because of operational costs. So I'm not trying to create fear. I'm just saying that we are not St. Vrain School District. St. Vrain has the potential to grow to 50,000 students. I think those are their projections, because they have tons of space to develop that isn't impacted by open space. That's not Boulder Valley School District. Boulder Valley School District is all but built out. And as populations age and housing becomes less affordable, you're following the conversation of the city of Boulder right now about middle-class folks not being able to live in Boulder. That soon is going to make its way to Lafayette and Louisville, and families with young children are going to have that same issue. And where they're buying homes is east of us in Weld County and north of us in the St. Vrain School District or in northern Jefferson County, and many of them are coming back into our district through open enrollment, but they can't afford housing in our school district. So, I mean, this is why we're having this conversation with the city of Boulder right now, because we have interest that our own employees can live in our school district, which many of them cannot right now because of the cost of housing. So this is a really big, complicated issue, which I know you understand, but my worry really isn't about building classroom space for enrollment. I just hope we have strong enrollment so we can maintain not just keeping schools filled. I mean, that's good, we can fill schools, but what drives that is our budget, which is the programming we can offer to our students. That's one of our advantages right now, is the strength of our budget because of our strong enrollment and a mill levy override, which is a huge benefit.
Well, I appreciate your long-term perspective on it, and I agree that the board needs to discuss, our sort of feelings about class size. But what concerns me is not necessarily or only what's going to happen in 10 years, but class sizes of 55 students right now. And while we try and figure out what's going to happen in the next 4 or 5 years, there's a cohort of kids that are going through in some of our high schools with very high class sizes, and even, higher than we would like in certain elementary schools and middle schools. So, there's 2 sides of it. There's the short term and there's the long term, and I'd like us to be thinking about both.
I would just need to say, we do not have any regular education classrooms with 55 students. Our guidelines for high school is 35 for regular education. We may have choir, we may have other study halls that exceed that. We do not have regular classrooms that exceed. We have 35 as a guideline. The only reason we would do that is to make a personal exception for students. Our elementary schools, average 24. So we have some that are 28 to 30, and we have some that are 19 to 20. And we have a number of them in the low 20s. And so I mean, I just want to be truthful about, where we are with class size. If we want to expand a high school's offerings, we can simply extend the day. I mean, it's the most flexible environment. We open and enroll hundreds of students into Fairview, which is our largest high school. If we think we need to better utilize that space, we simply reduce the number of students we take in through open enrollment. Most of them are coming out of district and Broomfield High School. So I guess just because I live with this data all the time, I'm just encouraging that we not let this disrupt the SIPSI planning process, because a lot of work has gone into this. And then if we need to come back and talk about how we manage enrollment and how we reduce the number of students in schools and consider the impact that may have on our overall budget, that's a really important discussion to have. I just don't think it needs to necessarily interrupt the planning process around SIPSI. That's all I'm asking. Not that we don't have the discussion.
Other questions? Tina?
So I haven't gone through this type of SIPSI process before. So there are some items here that will require more money from operating funds, and we went through that in email.
Yeah.
So how do we address that now? Because we know it's hard to get $4 million.
Yeah.
And we need $4 million to do the kindergarten, and then we have the preschool. And I think there's more cost with the kitchen, but I'm not entirely sure, like where it all kind of ends out. So what will be our process for making those trade-offs? And that's more of maybe a process question than making a decision at this point in time.
So I'd be glad to answer that, Lori, if that's appropriate.
Thank you for that.
So all of them are kind of separate and different. I mean, so air conditioning, we talked about that. That's real electricity, and it just has to come out of the general operating fund. So, and so we talked about that last week, and you have those numbers. Kindergarten, we've estimated that $4 million for additional staff. So if we build the space, they will come. I'm pretty confident parents would enroll their children for the most part in full day K. But that's a real cost. And so the district would have a couple of options. One is continue to work our lobbying efforts in Denver, because, I think there's a strong commitment to full day K there. We may or may not get that done. But if not, one option that you could consider as soon as you wanted to in an election is to run a mill levy override for full day K. That's allowable for both the staffing and actually some operational costs if that were needed, but probably most of, not operational, facility costs, but most of that probably would be addressed in this bond. So the preschool, as you know, the space available in preschool, there's really three ways that preschool children their education is paid for right now. One is through Colorado Preschool Program. So we have numbers that will apply for more. So that's a way that offsets that cost. We also charge tuition, and we have very willing parents to pay tuition for our high-quality preschools. And then some of the children are through through special education Part B preschool. It's not nearly adequate to fund that, so we subsidize that with the general fund because we're obligated by law to educate the 3 to 5 year old preschool special education children. And then we subsidize it through the general fund through 3A, which passed in 2010. We talked about that a couple of weeks ago. So as there's expansion, the limitation of the number of preschool children that could participate in our space would be limited by the amount of general fund support we could give, which would compete with utilities and everything else, the amount of tuition-paying parents who would want to do that, and then any other additional funding we could secure through the Colorado Preschool Program. Even with the adjustment of $17 million for early learning this year in the legislature, there's still identified needs across the state for Colorado Preschool Program, and we try to compete for those like everyone else. So I'm not as confident around the money for the cost of preschool as I am around full day K, mostly because one we can control and the other we can't, because we can't do a mill levy for preschool. Now, we do already invest some money in kindergarten full day at 7, now 8 of our schools. So we could, I'm not proposing this, we could take that money, move it to preschool, and backfill that money and ask for more than $4 million. The $4 million is what we would need to take where we are to full implementation, assuming we already have 8 schools in place. So if we took all the money that we're presently investing in full day K in those 8 schools and moved it to preschool, general fund contribution, in addition to what we're already doing, then we could go to the voters and ask for the $4 million plus the balance. And again, I'm not proposing. I just want you to know that's flexibility that the board would have, and there'd be nothing improper about that. It'd be just a matter of managing the overall general fund. So those would be the areas around those. The kitchen, the centralized kitchen, if we were to choose to make the capital investment to create that on this campus, what's noted in your materials is a reduced operational cost. So we actually believe our per meal, per participant cost on the ongoing operation side, on today's dollars, will be reduced if we move to a centralized preparation facility. So, as you know, for several years, we subsidize our food service program from the general fund, and in your notes, you saw that many other districts do as well, as much as we do or more. So that's not a unique phenomenon. Partly is food costs for healthy food options, which are required by USDA. We don't charge enough to offset that cost, so it's not unlike other districts. So we actually think the centralized kitchen operational costs could be reduced, and actually, I'm not making any guarantees because we don't know what labor costs or food costs are going to do 5 years from now, but we do see a distinct advantage of efficiency around a centralized kitchen versus 3 or 4 regional kitchens for reasons we described last week and are in your notes as well. So that'd be a few of the areas. We did some pretty hard look, and we put some of this data in here around the Erie School. It's a little hard, so we built this on a K-8 900 student building. That's the $47 million that's in the SIPSI. It really depends how quickly it grows, and how we talked about doing a K-5, K-6 school to open it and then grow into the middle school and let the enrollment come with it. We believe you see the numbers from St. Vrain and Boulder Valley in the Erie area. We draw a number of students from across the line, so we think there probably would be some in-migration to help offset with this. So you have the number of teachers and some costs that are associated with the number of children you have, but there's some overhead costs associated with opening a new school and operating it. So we worked on this with Cabinet. So given what we know, the question is pace. How quickly would the school get built? How quickly will they build houses? Pretty rapidly right now, my understanding is. So that one's got a bit of a question mark on just, would we have to lean on the general fund a bit to get it open so that we could do that? But we're really dependent there on increasing enrollment in that area, overall enrollment that will help us with that. So I don't know if that helps, Tina. Most of the others, we actually see some efficiencies that we don't have exact calculations on utility efficiencies on some of the retrofits on sustainability, but clearly there will be some that will add up as well as through the FCA categories. With Don described to you last week about some of the efficiencies that we'll be building around boilers and those kinds of devices.
Any follow-up to that? No? Okay. All right. Any other comments or questions? Tom? Thank you. Hi.
So thanks to all the staff for putting all the hard work in and getting that information out to us on Saturday. Unfortunately, I need more time because with the graduations and Memorial Day activities and my day job, I really didn't have a chance to go through and give that information any justice. So I really need more time. I'd like to reserve more time to really dig into that and see if I can understand it. I think there are a couple of things here that I would like to address overall. I'm trying to figure out how the best way to say this. I get conflicting data. So, on one side I hear what you're saying about the open enrollment. On the other side, I look at the Louisville Elementary growing, 200 students in the last few years, and then saying, well, it's only a fraction of that is open enrollment. So, I really need to see the data. In fact, that's why I asked for the request for information on class sizes, is because, we hear as a board piecemeal information across the district. What are the class sizes? We hear from parents, we hear from teachers, we hear from principals, and there's conflicting information. There was an email just here recently on Foothill about the same thing, where the lady was saying, well, there are 29 students, and you came back and said, no, there's 25 or 24.
Actually, I showed you the per classroom data this afternoon that showed you every one of the classrooms. Yeah. That's why I shared with you.
So
Which averaged 24.
somehow that data is not.
Oh, no, they have the data. They were just talking about a single grade level, Tom.
Okay.
The grade level their children were in that grade level is reflected in that note I sent to you today, in the upper 20s. But then what I wanted you to look at was if you have an average of 24.5 in a school, and then if you have some at 28 and 29, what I've been saying is you just need to look, and my guess is you'll have some at 20 or 21, and sure enough, there they were, those kindergarten and first grades at 20 and 21. So, so that school could staff that building differently. That's a principal's discretion to do that. So they could create in another section, and they could team their K-1s. So there are lots of different ways to build staffing patterns to stay in the traditional rubric of classrooms, but the ratio is 24.5 to 1. If you let some go down to 20, the only way you can do that is go up higher at others. So that is the data, and that'll play out in every school building because this is just math. This is taking a total enrollment, actual or projected, dividing it by that ratio, which I've shared with you several times, and that that was in that note I sent to you today, and then that principal appealed for an additional allocation and received it, and that's what she built her staffing pattern on. None of those exceed the district standard. All of those classrooms are below the district standard of 29 at those grade levels.
What is the district standard?
So I shared those with you. It depends on the grade level.
Right.
So at the grade level, it's 29.
I didn't know we had a standard.
Well, I shared those documents with you. I sent those to you last week that showed there's language in the contract that
I know the
reaches a certain-
contract, but that's not a standard. That's
Well,
contract union
that's what we
language,
have
right?
used for years in this
Yeah,
district. And I
that's a
sent you
union deal.
staffing guidelines for the high school not to exceed
Right,
35.
so what I'd like to do is look at it on a larger basis from the board, as a board saying, okay, what do we believe is correct? What is
I
our
agree with
community
that.
value? How big should class sizes be? Not what's in the union contract, but what do we think is best? And we've got conflicting data. Some we hear from principals. We hear from a lot of teachers that Shelley got some anonymous surveys on about class size. So I'm getting conflicting information across the board. And I just want to see the data. I want to see the data that says, okay, what are our class sizes by grade, by school, over the last 3 or 4 years, so we can look at the trend. What are we projecting for next year? Because I think this is important when we get into looking at at spending, $500-600 million bond that, we won't have for another 10 years, another decade maybe, before we do this again. I think it requires some consideration. That's where we want to go. What it class sizes, what are our values, what our community wants. Do we need extra class sizes? Can we even if we add extra class sizes, would then the community spaces be large enough, the overall capacity of the school? So that's the data I would like to see that, and, I have an RFI out there that we got to decide whether we're going to do or not. And so far right now, I hear that, it's going to take too much time, but I think that's an important time for us to spend. I mean, that's the job of this board, to look at data. And we were talking earlier today about data and how we should make decisions on data. Well, let's get the data. I want to see the data. I want to see what the class sizes are, and I want to understand the considerations around that and what is affected by open enrollment, what is affected by projection data, what can we do about it? Because open enrollment takes a while to filter through, especially at the elementary level. You got 6 years there for it to filter through if we decide to shut it off. So those are some of the bigger picture items that I really care about, and right now, until I can digest some more of this data, it's hard for me to see. Now, it's good news that it appears from the polling that our taxpayers are open, for larger amounts. And we've discussed many times of how we get inadequate state funding to even keep our facilities under repair and do basic maintenance and basic required safety issues. So this is the only way we have of doing that, plus expanding the schools under our current, governmental environment, and probably will be for a number of years. So I'd like to take the time to make sure we do this right. And for me to understand and believe that we're going to do this right, I need to see the data. So
Okay.
I'll stop.
No, okay, thank you for talking about the polling and the work of SIPSI. I mean, I think what we've done is ask SIPSI to analyze the situation as best they can, look at the enrollment that we do have, look at the programs that we do have, try to think about what the best facilities are. Do you have, and I understand not having enough time to look at it because it was really quite a bit of information. Do you have any, other than the question about enrollment and class size per year for the 2 years previous and forecast, do you have any comments about this building, or do you want to just wait until next time? You want to just wait on the SIPSI stuff?
Yeah, I think in
enrollment.
order to do it justice, I mean, we had a good work session. We asked lots of questions. We've gotten a lot of data. Thanks very much, and everyone that participated. Thank you, by the way, for SIPSI and the hard work, because I know this is a tremendous effort.
Yep.
And I
Okay.
appreciate all that. And my comments in no way reflect your dedication or hard work of anyone in this district,
Right.
staff included.
Right.
But
That's right.
it's our job as a board to try to understand this and figure out what's the best way to approach it, what does our community value? So I just need some time to digest it.
Okay, well, we're bringing it back in 2 weeks.
Good.
So, the further discussion about what might be in this bond. So, anybody else have any questions, comments? Sam?
Just restate the obvious, that the air conditioning is one of those things where we have community values in direct conflict. And I'm having a hard time deciding on that. I appreciate that we've costed out the additional operating funds, but there's no getting around the fact that we value thermal comfort of our students and staff, and we value sustainability, and this is, in direct conflict, and I'm still, struggling with that particular piece of the recommendations. I don't know if anybody else is, or everybody else is okay with going with the recommendation as a whole. Just putting it out there that I can't sign off on the air conditioning right now.
I'll just add that I'm also a little conflicted on that, and I think that it's a tough one, not only partly because we have these different options, 5 extended, 5 troublesome, and then there's some other schools that my guess they're probably kind of toasty too at certain times a year, and then what about those? So I'm also sort of in a similar place, and it does have an operational cost attached to it as well, so that's but again, this is the SIPSE's recommendation, and they did put down that recommendation, so my guess is they put more thought into it than I've been able to, so I'm probably leaning toward that.
Well, I guess we'll wait and see what we'll do on air conditioning, how we'll vote for. The obvious is that no one in this entire district, and you said it yourself, Bruce, is going to be happy with exactly everything that's in it. I've got some concerns about some of it, but overall, it is absolutely fantastic, and it will be great for our schools. Well, everybody, many people would be happy with much. I'm in that category. So, anyway, Jenny.
So I'm going to say something about the air conditioning just because I live near one of the high priority schools and would like to be able to continue to do my grocery shopping in my neighborhood. And I've been hearing about that school for, even before I got on the board. And I think
Me too.
I think if we shared the data on some of the I think that you're right. We're leaving some schools pretty toasty. So my impression is, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, so maybe it's a question, the schools that were singled out as high priority are pretty darn hot. And they stay hot, it's not just a few weeks a year. I hear people complaining in October sometimes that that Broomfield Heights Middle School is still very hot. The windows, so I don't think we should discount just how uncomfortable those schools are. If anything, I have a little bit more concern just on an equity basis. I'll let you talk in a minute, Bruce. I just got going. On an equity basis, that some of our schools are air conditioned all year and some of them are not. So I think there's sort of an equity thing there that we should decide. It doesn't strike me as fair for us to decide to be green on the backs of kids that are hot right now. I think that's either a burden that should be more district-wide, or we should figure out how to be a little bit more equitable about that. Were you going to say something?
Topic. The only thing, because you're right, Tina, they did spend a lot of time on it. So again, that's the SIPSE process. That's what they spent months and weeks on, is that, and ultimately struggled with the same issues you're probably struggling with. So because there are conflicting values. So I want to remind you, we talked about it last week, there's 2 groups of schools. Those of which we plan to offer summer programming in, and that would be our commitment if we go there, is to offer summer programming in those schools, in addition to those schools that we already do summer programming that are air conditioned, because that's a number of our schools, our middle schools that are air conditioned, that we have summer programming in. So that's the one group of 5. The other group of 5 are those that just physically, we don't believe with the best ventilation systems that we plan to install as a part of this FCA work, that we can get it down to a reasonable temperature. We're comfortable with the other buildings, that we can make the rest of that group far more comfortable and reasonable, being sensitive to our calendar. I think there will still be interest to continue to push that August date back, and we have done that a week already. They're very interested to do more in time, but we really think that threshold was getting the rest of those schools that aren't going to do summer programming, that don't have their own physical facility challenges like Broomfield Heights Middle School, that we can make them comfortable. Not controlled climate like Sam talks about, so they're different. And that really is what we heard in most of our community value sessions, is that if you can do that, that's okay. With these other two categories where we just know we can't do that because physically we can't get them cooled down. So I just want to remind you, that's what got us to these 10 schools. We're year-round schooling, not year-round school, for 5, and the other 5 are those just really architecturally difficult buildings.
Some of which are also title schools, and I think that
Right.
Comfort might help learning in some of those cases. So that, and then the other thing I'd just like to comment is, I'd sort of like to comment a little bit on class size, not a lot. I heard you say that if we as a board decide to reduce class size, we can do that within the current building capacity. So I'm happy with that. I'm happy knowing that, because I do think this is clearly a conversation we're going to be having going forward. I live in a community that's very concerned about being able to hire counselors for elementary school children, so I have some reservations about putting all of our resources just into class size, because I think there are other needs we need to meet. But again, that's a conversation I think we can, I look forward to having in the future, because I think it's an important one, and it reflects community values. Just that's all I have to say on that. Just a quick question. Lafayette Elementary isn't full?
Lafayette Elementary, I don't believe is full. It hasn't been for some time, I don't believe.
Oh, really? I thought it was full.
Ryan is down 50 students.
Oh, not anymore? Really? Since your kids left? That's it?
And no, none of them.
Taking
None
their
of
friends,
them are at
taking their friends
capacity.
with them, huh, Jim?
Ryan, Sanchez, or Lafayette Elementary.
Yeah. So I'm really thrilled with the polling date on this. In fact, it looked to me like you're right, Jim, there was more support for the bigger package than there was for one of the smaller packages, which I thought was kind of remarkable, but I kind of thought your comments made sense. Well, if we're gonna do it, we might as well do what we need to do and not spend the next 5 years explaining why we didn't fix the things we didn't fix. And the other comment I'd like to make is, the Boulder Valley voters have now said yes 2 years in a row to raising money to improve the education of their children, and it's time that we as Boulder Valley said, yes, we'll do that. If you keep telling us yes, we'll accept that and spend some more money on educating our children. So this strikes me as a perfect opportunity to do that. And even though we haven't really figured out how we're going to pay for full-day kindergarten yet, I know that that's a real demand in our community. When I sort of test, when I visit schools and principals tell me that the number of kids we have enrolled in the kindergarten enrichment programs is more than half a lot of the time. So I think there's a demand for that, and I potentially look forward, if the state won't pay for it, to asking our voters if they're willing to pay for that as well one of these days. I'm not proposing anything for September, just want to say that I'm looking forward to exploring how we would manage full-day kindergarten, because I think there is a real demand for that. I don't know, so I'm kind of thrilled with this and very excited, and I would also like to say that another of the operations costs that you didn't refer to, Bruce, but that one of the things that would happen if we don't go for this bond is we have to figure out a way how to make those. I was really shocked last week when the comment was that we're not paying for the kinds of repairs that we used to pay for that affect safety and well-being. And if we can't go forward with a bond, then we have to start taking that out of our general budget, because we just can't not address those issues. And so there's another something we need to think about when we're thinking about the operating costs going forward. And then as a final comment, one more comment, I'd like to say that many of us on the board toured this facility, not this building, but the transportation facility and the warehouse facility before the meeting tonight. And there's another place where, it's not safe, and you can't, there are efficiencies that could be realized if we had decent facilities. And I'm also really concerned that it's not really very safe for our employees or comfortable. And I feel like we have sort of an obligation to provide reasonable working conditions for our employees. And so I just, and we're clearly not in our I mean, it's not even paved back there. So it's also a sustainability thing, which I know you heard, Sam, and I heard too, that we're like the runoff from the parking lot back there into Boulder Creek. Is it Boulder Creek? Is a real, yeah, well, anyway, yes, you're probably right. The runoff is an ecological problem that I think if we're serious about being green and sustainable, we should deal with. That's all I have to say right now.
Okay, thanks. Shelley? Yeah.
I just have this additional thought kind of rambling around in my head, which is that, because 60% of our voters are likely to approve this, we are at risk of sort of succumbing to the tyranny of the majority without thinking about the 40% of people who are a little more hesitant about this. And I wonder if maybe, it causes me to think a little bit about, if we might not want to consider certain things, like in using air conditioning for an example. Like if they'd only approved the first package, we probably would have seriously discussed pushing the school year back another week or two to, ensure that, there would be less, high temperatures during that time when we need air conditioning. So I'm wondering if those aren't things we should still consider, even though the 60% is, likely to approve this, that maybe we don't have to max it out just because 60% of people might be okay with that. And it's just a thought I'm having, that we should still be fiscally maybe conservative in support of the 40% that might find this more palatable if we weren't spending every single dollar.
So I'll just respond to that. I think Tina's question about operation costs, I think to some extent plays into this. And it is absolutely critical. I mean, I have to say that I came into this conversation last week, I guess we had the first time, thinking, well, what would we cut? Because I was worried about what the polling might show. Now that I don't have such a fear about that, I still feel that we must be very responsible. And so if there are things that we think should not be funded, I mean, I think it's fine to continue to bring it up and to suggest it. But no matter what, we are responsible for the money. I mean, that is absolutely what we're responsible, both for SIPSI and for the proposed budget and for everything that we do. I mean, that's what we're obligated to do to our public, and it's what every one of us ran on, was fiscal accountability and trying to think about how to save money and to make sure that we're spending it as well as we can on kids. So to that end, I would say, and I'm not really prepared to go into it this evening, but I would, I'm still having some questions about the operation costs of the kitchen, and I appreciate your questions about operation costs about kindergarten. And so I think those are things also that we might want to continue to think about. But I will say that in general, I am very grateful to SIPSI. I think the SIPSI members have done a great job. Thank you to staff. And I think that you've heard lots of optimism here today. A few questions to continue to think about for in 2 weeks when we bring it back. So, Jenny.
Could I address Shelley, because I think that's an interesting point, which I hadn't thought about either. But I would like to comment that the package, even the $500 and how many million? $570 million package that's before us is kind of conservative already, because as I recall, SIPSI actually identified $900 million
Right under
worth of
900 million.
needs. So that's not to discount what you're saying, because I also agree that it's our job. It's always our job to be fiscally responsible and to spend the taxpayers' money wisely. So it's an interesting point, but that's just my initial thought about that.
Luckily, somebody else has already cut down some of that for us, maybe. Thank you, SIPSI, yet again, to try to think about it. Okay, any other comments about the SIPSI update, the SIPSI report? No? Okay.
Also, I would ask, Lori, going
Sure.
forward, since we have a 2-week time before we come back to this, as board members, if you have questions like we did in the session last time, because you may not have had time to spend, as Tom said, as much time with this as you would like, don't hesitate to follow up directly to me. And if they are questions that we can readily answer, and it's just that we didn't get that deep of a dive. We'll do that, and I'll copy you, and we'll put it, so everything we're doing will be public. I just want to make that clear, and we'll put it in the library section. So if we send you something to answer a question, then we'll put it in the library on board docs. We'll send it to you personally so you have it, and we'll put it in board docs so members of the community, if they want to be able to access it now or in the future, it will be there as well. So we'll do that, and
Great.
be prepared. Thanks.
Good. Thank you. Well, it's 10 after 8. Time for us to move on to the next agenda item, which is our proposed budget.
So,
So,
President
Bruce,
Albright, I'd be glad to
kick this
take
one
that
off
one.
for us, please.
So
Thank
we
you.
do not have a presentation for you. What you have in your packet, which I know you know, is we are now transitioning from the preliminary budget, which you looked at on several occasions, including a work session, to now, this is on our timeline, a proposed budget. And so what I will share with you is the proposed budget reflects what's in the preliminary budget. So, the proposed preliminary areas of investment on programs and personnel and other costs that were in the preliminary budget have been rolled into this proposed budget. So a topic I know of interest to you, and I just remind you because we've talked about it before, is some good news pieces is that we move all of the literacy investment for interventionists and services. All of it now is in ongoing funding. In the last 2 years, we were paying a portion of that in one-time year-end money, so we're not dependent on that anymore. And so some stability in the budget around that and some other one-time costs that we know were ongoing, because you've had to, as a board, each budget year for the last 2, make that commitment. We recognize these are one-time as per your policy. So that's one point I would make. The other is what's in this proposed budget is $1 million in a staffing reserve and an additional $400,000 that, if you remember the preliminary budget, said it was unobligated, meaning we hadn't proposed putting it anywhere, and it's not obligated anywhere. Now, I've had individual conversations, I believe, with all of you around staffing in the last few weeks, and so several of you suggested to me, so I'm just going to say it here, as staff, we're very comfortable putting all $1.4 million in the staffing reserve, work through the summer, the early fall. That's when most of the activity will happen around these appeals that we're still working on. We'll know in the fall, when our children come back, exactly what our class sizes are and get the year started. I would just like, if you give me a nod of yes on that, then what I'd like to do is just come back to you in the early fall and just describe to you where I think we are with staffing and appeals and second semester and anticipated amount we think we should set aside for during the year. And then I guess give ourselves that discretion in the revised budget that we could move it to school resource allocation or something else. So anyway, so I guess what I'm saying is there's 1.4 that could be used in combination of staffing reserve or other uses. And initially, I would just say we should hold it in the staffing reserve as we work through the appeals and respond to these high section counts or whatever. I mean, we are still a ways away from knowing where we'll be exactly with all of our section counts in our high schools, especially and that all changes again. So. Otherwise, this is a budget you've seen before. It's just moved from a preliminary budget format to a proposed budget format, and I stand ready to answer any questions you have, or if we need to, we'll bring staff to the podium.
Okay, great. Board members, any questions or comments? Shelley, question?
I have a question about the tuition-based preschool enrollment. It looks like it's down over last year, like almost 19%. I think that was like 62 students, and I'm just wondering if there's
So what page are you on, Shelley?
I think it was page 20. I'm just wondering if we know why that is. It looks like some sort of anomaly.
Mr. Sutter, do you know? I'm not aware of that.
Looks like Bill's looking it up.
So you're on the top of page 20, is that under district-wide preschool enrollment? Shelley, is that what you're asking about? Under tuition, we 302 down to 245?
Yeah.
Proposed October count, 14. So that 245 is what we're projecting. It isn't what was. So, Bill, on that column of 2014 proposed October count, we have 245 students under tuition paying preschool. Do you see that spot?
Yes.
I'm not sure how we would know that.
Running up to the preschool program fund to see if there's a particular indication. I mean, some of it is particularly at this time of the year, we don't know the students coming in. That's sort of a decision that gets made a little bit later in the fall. So
Might
we're
be a
looking at
conservative estimate.
revised October count on the budget side. So that's, into November when that's coming through, October. And then the official count, 302. It's just an estimate of what's coming in.
So there wouldn't be any reason to believe that it wouldn't be 300 next year. It might have been 245 last year in the early part of the budget. I mean, that might have been just a conservative estimate.
Yeah.
Okay. Because remember, these are tuition-paying students, so that's not for official October count. So we would fill seats available with tuition-paying students, and we don't have fewer seats. I mean, I suppose if we had an abundance of Colorado preschool program slots, but most of those children are with us now also, and they're being funded through the general fund because they're identified. So I think, Shelley, that's probably just a conservative estimate.
Yeah, thanks. And then I don't know, this is just a comment from somebody who has been a youth coach over the year, that I'm looking at the price increase for gyms, for the use of gyms that's projected in these numbers. And I can tell you as a youth coach that that's a pretty big jump for an hour of gym time. And I'm just wondering if, what kind of community input we might have had. Some of these look very reasonable to me, the increases.
So what page
I'm
are you
just,
on, Shelley?
wondering how those things got decided.
So what page are you on, Shelley?
I didn't make a note about the page, but if you go to athletics and it
So
lists.
we have not, this budget doesn't change the fee structure.
It doesn't? Shoot, I wish I would have written that down. It's somewhere between page 20 and
You have it,
44.
Leslie?
Shelley,
here
are
it
you
is,
talking
here it
about
is,
the
here it is.
athletics fund or the community schools program fund?
On page 30. Community Schools Fund.
Okay, so not general fund budget.
So I thought those were, I may have misconstrued it. I thought those were increases. Like see where it says gyms, youth and senior rate, 19 and 31?
Right,
Isn't that an
that's the total charge. That's not an increase, that's the total charge.
It's what we presently charge?
Correct.
Okay, so that's a present charge. So a fee change would be brought to the board. This is our present pricing structure.
So why are there two numbers there? Sorry. Why is that a range? Is that one for youth and one for seniors, or?
It depends, yes, there's one for youth and one for seniors, but it
Okay.
also depends on what kind of multipurpose room it is. So, for example, if it's a big gym or a multipurpose room in a high school or a small room, they charge different rates.
Okay, so these are all the same numbers?
That's right.
Okay, okay.
There may be a slight increase in some of these, but they're pretty similar. They go up, they do a study every year, Community Schools does, to make sure we're close to the market with our other groups that rent facilities.
Okay.
And there's sometimes slight increases, but we try and stay with the market.
Okay. And then just a question, clarification on page 44 around staffing changes. Looks like the projection is that we're down FTE over 11 FTE. And is that just a function of enrollment? And it looks like elementary's down 9.5 FTE.
Those first few lines on the school changes, staffing formula, elementary, middle, and high. So that's the shift between elementary and high school. As high school grows and elementary stays the same, the numbers of people or FTE were shifted between the grades. Let's see, what else? One-time staffing, in and out. Just trying to look through where some of the net changes are.
I mean, I can see, like, it's listed where those come out, which ones are up and which ones are down. But it's a net reduction of over 11 FTE, and I'm just, I'm trying to reconcile that with the fact that our staffing ratios are the same, and, and trying to understand.
If you have fewer students proportionally and you apply the same staffing ratio, they're going to get fewer staff, obviously.
Right, so that's what I'm asking.
So
Is
we
this
look at it
enrollment
K-12.
related?
We look at it K-12.
This is enrollment related?
Right.
Okay.
I mean, if that's the shift that Bill's describing, because we take the gross number of students, the total, and divide it by and work the budget backwards and establish the ratio, and then it's divided by the actual number of students. So that could cause a shift between levels, increases in some and down from others, so.
So I think another piece is the staffing reserve, the one-time staffing reserve that was in there was in as FTE.
Okay.
And the staffing reserve that we have in there now is just a dollar amount, so it's
Okay.
not built in as FTE, but
So it doesn't show as people yet.
right,
Okay.
that would reduce the gap significantly.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah,
All
because
right,
it's just
thank
in
you.
the budget now, not in actual. Thanks, Bill.
The budget's tricky. And,
Slice and time.
okay. Any other comments, questions, issues? Tom? Okay.
I'll go next. So, Bruce, you and I talked a couple of times. I have an overall philosophical concern with the way the budget is being proposed. If I stand back and look at things at the top level, last year, for the first year in 4 or 5 years, we were actually funded for both growth and cost of living. We had a lot of cuts that we were trying to bring back together, and a lot of things that were happening. So we did not fund for any growth. We did not fund FTE. We had one-time allocation for staffing reserve for hotspots and things like that, but we did not fund any growth. This year, we have, again, we're funded for cost of living. We're also funded for growth. In addition, we've got a reduction of the negative factor for Colorado. So about 10% of the negative factor is being funded by state legislature. Yet we're still not, funding any growth in our schools. We're growing projections next year that we're growing by, 255 students or so. If I look at over the last 4 years plus projections for next year, as a district, we will have grown 2,000 students. 2,000 students without adding any FTE. So that's reflected in our ratios that you sent the email on a few weeks ago of how we keep inching up in our ratios, and we see that, of course, in our class sizes and some of the overcrowding concerns. So my major concern with the way this budget is being proposed now is it's not being a sustainable, ongoing increase in staffing for growth. That's not happening in this proposed budget. Again, we're looking at allocations for staffing reserves so we can deal with hotspots and so on. And one of the issues I have with that, obviously, is that sometimes we don't know what we're getting into until the fall, and we hold back some of it to the fall, and then schedules are set and classrooms are set and plans are made, and it's teachers have been hired, and we're looking for other teachers that it's difficult to staff, but probably not the staff we would like to have. So what I'm really advocating is that, we've got a little breathing room this year. Let's fund the growth that we have for this year. We're not going to be able to afford to fund the 2,000 student growth that deficit that we required over this recession. But I believe we can fund the growth projections for next year, 255 students or so. That's what I would like to see in a sustainable fashion by FTE, not by one-time allocations. So there's a lot of moving parts to the budget, as we all know. A lot of issues associated with how we provide our services to our students. But again, I think the overall optics of this, perception of this, just looks bad for the district. We're going to be asking for $900 million maybe, or not 900 million, 500 million, 570 million. Maybe we'd like 900 million. That's what the needs are. But 570 million for bonds. But at the same time, over the last 2 years, we've got cost of living, we've got growth funded, and we've got a reduction in negative factor, but we're not putting it into the classroom in terms of a sustainable FTE for teachers. I mean, each year we can do this allocation funding for hotspots, but that's a one time and it goes away. The next year, one time, it goes away. And in the meantime, we're just ratcheting right up in our classroom sizes and our ratios. So what I'd like to see and like to request, or actually we have requested it earlier, but we haven't seen it yet, is what would the budget look like if we are funding the growth for this year in an FTE, sustainable FTE, not in a one-time allocation. That's where I am.
So I might just report back to you information I've shared previously. To accommodate growth, projected growth for next year is $1.7 million of staff. You now have $1.4 million in staffing. It's not one time. This enrollment management and reserve and the $400,000 isn't one-time money. Those are ongoing funds in the budget. So an option we have is to distribute that today to the schools and have nothing left for reserve in the fall in the event that we need to add sections, or we use the approach that I've described to you where we dedicate that $1.4 million, $300,000 left and then $1.7 million, and do it on an as-need basis. Some of our schools are comfortable with their staffing today. They're ready to go forward. Some of our schools, we're still managing and working at that. We have both current enrollment and projected enrollment. The reality is these things shift. And my advice as your superintendent is to give our school administrators and our district administrators the flexibility to use that $1.4 million to respond to areas of need and not just distribute it today to all of the schools. Because we'll put resources in schools, they would welcome it. Who wouldn't? But they don't need it as much as other schools that might come fall. And so that would be my advice, is not distribute it. But this is not one-time money. This is ongoing funding. So if we say we want that $1.4 million invested in staffing and do the best we can in using it for 14-15 and keep it in there, keep it in staffing, so that when we have discussion later, and if we want to try to get back to where we were in 2009, we've grown 1,400 students since the window I've been drawing for you is over 3 to 4 years. It's 1,494 students. And so it's only been 3 years. This is the third year that we're proposing that we don't grow with the number of students. So under 1,000 students, or right at 1,000 students is that number. So if we wanted to go back to where we knew we're in 11-12 following the 3A levy, it's $5.5 million to do that. To get $5.5 million out of this budget would cause significant disruption. We already have $1.4 million, which all but covers the growth for next year, and it's in ongoing funds and staffing. That would give us a foot up if we want to try to freeze it, not grow the staffing ratio anymore. This all but does it. And then if you want to take a step back and get back to where we were in 2011, then we're going to need to find about another $4 million for the 15-16 budget, which, as I've communicated to you in previous correspondence, the time for that really is in the fall. Because that's really when we start developing the groundwork for a budget. Because we anticipate work with the legislature, we work on our bargaining units and build contracts, we make decisions around health benefits. We committed to a 7.5 increase in health benefits for our employees 2 years ago, and so that's obviously more than a cost of living of 2.8%. So there are costs that it takes to run a school district that exceed the cost of living, and our obligation to our pension for our employees, their retirement pension, and for their health benefits is an example of two areas that grossly exceed the cost of living. So, but if we're going to get there, which may be what we want to do, if that's our highest priority come fall discussion, or elementary counselors, or licensed professionals in talented and gifted, or whatever else we choose to do. I mean, we need to turn that early in the process and sit down with our employees and help them understand that we're going to need to do business differently. So anyway, I don't disagree, Tom, that those are all things we should talk about, but they really have to be at the front end of the budget development process. I mean, if they're of this significance. But again, I want to remind you, we have $1.4 million in staffing ongoing that's in this budget right now, the proposed budget. Not 1.7, but 1.4.
So let me address a couple of points there. We're receiving 1.7 million in growth.
For growth, yes.
For growth. So let's apply that 1.7 to the FTE ratios. And then that addresses the growth, because by the ratios, school grows, they get more money per student. If they don't grow or they go less, they get less money per student. So I don't see how that doesn't address some of the issues there. And by the way, I think there are other areas, that we can pull up the other 300K if we want to. I think we can find the other 300K within the existing budget by out of nearly $300 million. I think we can find that. So what I'm proposing is not right now trying to, and by the way, I'd like to get back to when I came on the board 2009-10, that's when the budget crisis hit. And, you know, that spring we had to reduce $12 million. And so we were doing a lot of cuts. So I would like to get back eventually where we were before the recession, not just, you know, 2011. And the data that I picked up was from CDE on the 2,000 students. I can show that to you. At any rate, I think there are more options, and I think I would like to see that invested in FTE, and then the principals can use it as they want to. You know, it's not an appeal process where they have to come and ask that I got additional problems here. They will have that in sustainable funding, and then they can address it, you know, as they feel needed within any given school, because it will be enrollment-based, because that's where our ratios work. I do think it is prudent to have some reserve for staffing things that happen. I mean, come October, September, October, when everything gets together, there'll inevitably, and there always are, you know, issues that we have to deal with, you know, unexpected issues. So I think it's always wise to have some level of staffing reserve held back if you can. But my preference would be, you know, let's get that into schools. Let the schools and the principals deal with the dollar amount by FTE ratios from growth or whatever. And that way we have that as a ratio for that year. Next year, you know, since it is you know, ongoing, then that's the basis for next year. Otherwise, the basis for next year is what it was this year, what it is the year before, what it was the year before. And that's what I don't like, because we're not ratcheting up.
Other comments? Jim?
Thank you. Typically avoid trying to address other board members. Director Myers, I believe what I heard from the superintendent was we are spending $1.4 million this year on staffing, ongoing. The difference is we're not just issuing it out now. We're waiting to see when, you know, Glenn does a tremendous job, but occasionally those 10 students show up in the wrong school, and it's really difficult to move a teacher. So what I'm hearing is we're going to be doing the prudent thing and having some reserve so that when our principals get hit with something, they're not trying to manage it without any resources, but that those resources will be fully allocated. So that's one. The second one, I really appreciate the way the district puts together the budget every year. 400 plus pages. We have questions about a certain page, and, you know, realistically within 30 seconds, and Bill's processing in his computer, I mean, he can remember why the numbers are in there, and that's always just super impressive to me. You know, every year we owe a debt of gratitude to our staff for managing the budget this way, and they should hear that. I get it. There wants to be a class size discussion on the board. Several members. You know, the budget's a zero-sum game, and if we're going to cut class size or reduce class size by the $5 million figure, Tom, I would totally support that discussion. But before we go into that discussion, I want to hear some things that you would cut. Transportation budget's $10 million, $5 million of it. So let's raise the walk distances by double, or perhaps athletics. You know, there's a lot of trade-offs in this. And if I know going into that discussion everything's going to be there, I'm comfortable having it. And if I allow you to comment coming back, but, you know, that discussion, you know, really, we can get there.
So I'm not talking about $5.5 million this year. I'm talking just the growth that we have been funded by the state, $1.7 million for this year. And I do agree, we need to have the conversation. And it's going to be a long conversation. It should be, because we need to look at the values of our community, needs in our schools, the budget, what we have to cut, because, you know, it is a matter of values, and they're competing values, and there are thousands of good things to do, but we can't fund all thousands of good things. So we have to make a decision.
I remember back, I'll make a comment here. I think it might have been my first year on the board. I don't remember exactly, but I know we've had this conversation about how much money do you hold back and how much flexibility do you allow for the hotspots. And that, to me, is the place where we really need to have some flexibility, because one year we didn't. have enough money. We didn't hold it back. We rolled it all out with the idea that it's better to do it earlier rather than later. And the lesson I took away, and the discussion was in the Budget Advisory Committee before Bruce was hired, and it was that very point that don't do that again. Make sure that you've saved plenty of money, because there will be hot spots. And that's because kids move around, parents move around. I mean, it's just really hard right now to predict. And the other thing I would say about class size is it would be interesting simply to change every single class number, but that's not being as strategic as we might want to be. As we are thinking about children who have difficulty reading, and whether we have extended days, whether we have extended years, whether we should have more staffing allocations into classes where there are higher needs, that's different than a one-size-fits-all or just a percentage growth. And so that, to me, is the conversation I'm looking forward to having, is where really are we thinking about our kids and their learning. And I'm not convinced that changing a number by one makes a difference. I know there are kids who've been in classes of 30 that are just peachy keen, and classes of 20 that are a real handful, and it just depends. There's a lot of variables. There's teachers, there's parents, there's kids, there's building size, capacity issues, locations of classrooms, heat. I mean, there's a lot of things, and I'm looking forward to the conversation. But I think the point that was made, that it's a little late right now to be bringing this up at the end of May, to be trying to think about where to make these cuts. For me, it's late. I would really like to do this. I mean, we set out a couple years ago the calendar to start in November, to say what are the values, what are the things that we're working toward. And that's where we really, we need to have the values conversation before then. What are the things that we want to do? So for me, that's where I am in this. It's a big budget, this multi-page. Another question. Is this in a hard copy anyplace? Have we Bill, you have one? How many do we have? Yes, please. This is really hard. It's hard for me to read it on a screen. I'd love to have a copy. And I don't mind borrowing it and giving it back. That's fine too. But it'd be great to be able to see it. Thanks. Okay. Anyway, I've made my comments. Jenny.
So I have a comment, because we've all been thinking about class size a lot. And I've decided, this is actually kind of exciting, because it's really the first time in 5 years since I've been on. we haven't had this discussion in any meaningful way before, because we've never had any resources before. And we still don't have nearly enough resources. I posit that paying down the negative factor by $110 million when it's at $1 billion is peanuts. But, and that we can do better as a state. However, I think that I'm really looking forward to the conversation, and I'm really happy that we're able to have this disagreement, because I think it means we have resources that we haven't had before. And
Okay. Great. Any other comments or questions or?
Ms. President, if I could.
Please.
So I agree with what Tom said about we would all cherish the day of getting back to pre-recession whatevers, class size programs. I just want to remind you that we're still $35 million negative factor just for BBSD. So that means that's $35 million we don't have today that we should have had we kept the funding level. So we did get a little bit of change this year. 110 million of over $1 billion as a state. So the reality is, if we were talking about $35 million more dollars to spend $5 million to get class size where we want it, and $5 million for counselors, and X million for kindergarten, we could do all of those things. But the reality is, in the state of Colorado, so the article in the paper today, Plaintiff District, Amendment 23, that's our effort to get to where we ought to be, closer, not to adequacy, but closer to where we were prior to the recession, before the legislature chose to underfund public education. So I just think we don't need to beat ourselves up too badly for things we can't do, because we're still well underwater with regard to the level of funding that we should have just from 2008, 2009. For our district, it's well over 10%. So anyway, I want to remind us of that context, because we're still getting an awful lot of energy out of this this operation, and we might all have different perceptions of what the thing at the top of the stack ought to be, and I get that. But just keep in mind that we're still doing an awful lot for being down $35 million. Thanks.
Okay. Jenny?
And we still all, I mean, and I'm really proud of our board because we're still all talking about what's good for kids first.
Thanks. Any other comments? Questions? Okay, I think you've got couple of comments, and guess
good.
we'll bring it back in
2 weeks.
2 weeks?
2 weeks. June 10th, Bill, for approval. Yep.
Okay. All right. Next item on, thank you, Bill, thank you, Leslie. Thank you, Bruce, for
bet.
this work
We
on
love
putting
it.
this together. It'll be great to see it in hard copy for me. The next item on our agenda is agenda setting, and I think I can say with confidence that we would like to talk about class size and enrollment, and maybe how large should a school be? I heard a little discussion, so let's, that is something, well, agenda setting is meeting a week from Thursday. So we'll talk about this and make some suggestions of what might be helpful to look at. So I've got that on my agenda. And the other question I think I heard tonight was a question about fees and whether there should be a cap on them. So let's also just have that discussion at agenda setting about whether we could set a time to talk about that. Okay? Is there anything else that, and I jumped in really fast. Anybody else have anything they'd like to say about agenda setting? Okay, I have Jenny, or Tom.
So how should we handle the, plan for looking at what happens at LAS? Should that be a study item coming up, or should that be an RFI, or should we ask for a report? I think we need to have a plan, and that's what we've been asked for, a plan. So how should we do that?
So I sent a note to Sandy. It's on the cabinet agenda for tomorrow. My thought, Tom, and members of the board, we'll lay out a timeline of, so you have consistent information from our house that gives you that foundation and also some possible timelines. I mean, we will consider all the other things that are going on in the district between now and a year from now. And so we can put a couple page package together, report to you and send it to you. So we'll start work on that tomorrow. I mean, Glenn has it. It's just a matter of putting it in one place. It's some of what we communicated to the Louisville City Council. We'll follow up with that, but put it on at least a proposed timeline. So we can do that and send that out to you. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Good. Jenny?
So I heard somebody at some point tonight say that they were interested, we're talking more about the use of data and how we use data in this district. So maybe, I can't remember who said it or when, but maybe that's a report. I mean, that's something for the fall, but
okay,
we need.
So one of the things I'd like to suggest, that actually came out of an earlier conversation we had, so one of the action teams in the strategic planning process is around evaluation. So what I really would like us to think about, so this isn't opposing that idea, is really that we'll begin to build a schedule for you that are updates from these action teams. Those we hope will be some of the board reports that come to you. Some of them we might choose to do in writing and some in person, but so that you can monitor the work of the strategic plan through these teams. And that's just one example. We have literacy and mathematics. So rather than having separate reports outside of what we're doing in the strategic plan, what we'd like to do is have a mechanism of reporting, a strategy of reporting and communicating to the board and to the community and to our employees about progress we're making and priorities set, and eventually maybe priorities for budget allocations, because some of these might call for resources. So anyway, I think it will fit into there, Jenny, from that evaluation committee.
Okay, good. Any other comments? Okay, well, this meeting's adjourned.